Memory Lane. We're going to be here for the next 60 minutes with this special edition. We are your hosts. I'm Fred Hickman.
And I'm Nick Charles. In 1991 in sports saw crowning achievements again, but maybe above all, shock value. Magic Johnson has the AIDS virus. Mike Tyson may never fight again, Fred.
Well, we're going to get to all of that in just a few moments, but first, the news headlines with Susan Brooke.
Thank you, Fred and Nick.
Everyone to the Sports Year in Review. We're going to have a lot of fun for the next 60 minutes, Nick, and we're going to begin by talking about baseball, and it was clearly a year dominated by the underdogs and the overachievers.
Exactly, Fred. Baseball 1991 topped off by a World Series that took our collective breath away. CNN's Hannah Storm has details of a season of streaks, surprises, and records.
One might have known from the start that the 1991 baseball season would be something special. On May Day, the A's Rickey Henderson slid into the history books with stolen base number 939, surpassing Lou Brock's all-time record.
Lou Brock was the symbol of great base stealing. But today, I'm the greatest of all time. Thank you.
But Henderson was almost overshadowed by an unassuming Texan that same night in Arlington. 44-year-old Nolan Ryan threw his 7th career no-hitter against the Blue Jays. Then, on a Sunday afternoon in July at Dodger Stadium, 36-year-old Dennis Martinez of the Expos threw just the 15th perfect game in Major League history. The individual achievements gave way to the ultimate team effort. The work hard, play hard Minnesota Twins became the first team in modern-day baseball history to go from last place in their division to the World Series the next year. The Atlanta Braves made the same remarkable journey from worst to first, culminating in a division race with the Dodgers that went down to the second to last day of the season. Their playoff with the Pirates came down to a matter of inches, or feet in one instance. But it was a series that mostly belonged to the kid. Steve Avery was the MVP, and he combined with John Smoltz to shut out the Pirates in Games 6 and 7 at Three Rivers. Suddenly, we had a topsy-turvy World Series. With heroes by the name of Leas and Lemke and a roly-poly Puckett skying high for the game-saving catch in Game 6 and digging down deep for the game-winning home run. The wins came by the smallest of margins. 5 games were decided by just 1 run. But in the end, it was Jack Morris going a Herculean 10 scoreless innings for the title.
It's unbelievable. It's a special place to be a part of, and we saw a great series. It was a classic.
It was one of the greatest World Series ever, between 2 teams that believed in themselves, making the 1991 baseball season forever an inspiration.
Well, you know, there were a lot of terrific baseball stories Hannah just told us about, but I think the one that really touches me, Nick, is the Dennis Martinez story. Guy throws a perfect game, and he became an instant national hero in his native Nicaragua, front page news, and he really took America's pastime and made it a worldwide spectacle.
Well, speaking of that, across the border, in the same vein, Toronto, Canada drew a baseball record 4 million fans this year, Fred. And looking ahead to next season, we'll be watching the teams that made major plunges in the free agent and trade markets. Things will look very different in 92, Fred.
And very much more expensive, too. Coming up next, the year that went from magic to tragic. Urban Johnson's plight. And that's a little later in the show.
But up next, an NFL season punctuated by a Super Bowl that was a battle while a war raged on in the Gulf. Stay with us. And And welcome back to a CNN Hour Special, the 1991 sports year in review, and a football season that stretched well beyond the parameters of the football field.
Boy, isn't that the truth, Nick? I mean, we made the trip down to Tampa, Florida in January. Super Bowl 25, more security than any sporting event in the history of sports. And many questioning whether the game should be played at all, with the war in the Gulf raging on and on.
Well, exactly. When bombs began to drop, it seemed that a Super Bowl was inconsequential. But soon, public sentiment in this country became overwhelming to play the game. And our Vince Cellini has more on an uneasy start to an NFL season that soon became memorable.
Something is happening outside. Peter Arnett joined me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
With war raging in the Gulf for almost 2 weeks, Super Bowl 25 seemed to be the perfect diversion. And before the Giants and Bills took the field at Tampa Stadium, fans stood to honor soldiers halfway around the world. What followed was the closest, some say the best Super Bowl ever. Not a penalty in the game, just vicious hitting, spectacular plays, and one kick to decide it. This was one giant victory and a grand exit for Coach Bill Parcells. Being on top is one thing, staying there another. Ray Hanley took the Giant coaching reins and took some heat by staying with Jeff Hostetler over longtime starter Phil Simms. Haas was unable to recreate his 1990 magic, and in Week 13 gave the job back to Simms because of injury. The New York defense wasn't always dominant, and the Giants are relegated to the role of playoff observer. Unlike the Giants, the Bills still look super in 91. Jim Kelly played trigger man for the league's #1 offense, leading Buffalo to a 4th straight division title. And it appears the road to Super Bowl 26 must pass through Buffalo. If there is a fast lane in pro football, the Redskins are in it. Mark Rippon put injury and inconsistency behind him and led Washington to 11 consecutive wins and the championship of the toughest division in football. But the greatest big-game quarterback in league history never took a snap in the 91 campaign. Joe Montana's elbow would not allow him to begin the regular season. Surgery followed. And one wonders if Super Joe played his final game on a cold January day against the Giants. And if it marked the end of an era for the once mighty 49ers.
So Montana's fate hangs in the balance, but there's no question the NFL underwent a changing of the guard between the Super Bowl in January and the playoff picture that's formed now.
Well, what a playoff picture it is, Nick. Out of the playoffs go the Super Bowl champion Giants, as well as the Niners, who don't make the field. But look who was there for the first time in years. You got teams like the Dallas Cowboys back in, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Detroit Lions. And if memory serves, the last time they won a playoff game, a guy named Bobby Lane was quarterback back in 1959.
Sure it wasn't when Gone with the Wind debuted, but, you know, Glanville comes in with that big fix. Really worked, and, of course, Detroit and Dallas. Coming up next is tumultuous a year in boxing, as you'll see, in and out of the ring, including talk of a mega fight that may never happen.
I know everybody out there's going, I knew that.
All the time.
Right. Now we turn our attention to the manly art of self-defense. A year in boxing that will remember more for what didn't happen, Nick, than what did happen.
Yeah, Evander Holyfield, Fred, against Mike Tyson was supposed to be the biggest fight in history, November the 8th. It never happened. And now Tyson fights a much bigger personal battle while Holyfield remains champion. Ironic. In March, Mike Tyson took on the dangerous Razor Ruddock with no title at stake. Tyson got into a head-on collision with a guy who also doesn't have a reverse gear. Ruddock hit Tyson with some hellacious shots, but Tyson answered with a vengeance. He hit Ruddock from everywhere, including blatant low blows and after the bell. And in the 7th, opened him up with a blazing, deadly combination. Referee Richard Steele jumped in and declared the fight over and Tyson the winner. And then everybody jumped into the ring in a scene right out of Riot Control. It was ugly, but it got people clamoring for a rematch. In April, Holyfield put his shiny new title on the line against George Foreman. Big George had fired the imagination of the public, but at age 42, he could only prove a point that he could, 1, take a punch, and 2, go the distance. Holyfield proved little, winning a unanimous decision. By June, Tyson and Ruddock were at it again. And again, Tyson did everything but knock out Ruddock. He may not have shattered Ruddock's spirit, but Tyson broke Ruddock's jaw and won a unanimous decision. But the long, hot summer got much hotter for Tyson. He was accused of raping a beauty contestant in Indianapolis in July. And by September, a grand jury ordered him to stand trial for rape.
Maybe there's people that probably don't understand the situation, but that's why I'm going to be judged on a jury of my peers.
Is it a concern or an alarm that it's basically going to come down her word against yours?
My situation is that I know that I'm innocent, and I used to want to continue to fight and show the people in the world that regardless of the controversy or whatever you hear, I'm the best in the world.
Tyson, in the meantime, had signed to fight Holyfield for his title in November, but by October, he was out of commission with a rib injury and was looking into the eye of a hurricane, scheduled to stand trial for rape next month. Meanwhile, Holyfield stayed busy back home in Atlanta and barely dodged a bullet in what was supposed to be a cinch fight. Instead, the champ got rocked by Bert Cooper in the 3rd round. Holyfield shook off the danger and banged out a 7th-round TKO, but the champion's armor had been dented. A victory over Tyson would certainly certify Holyfield's credibility, but this is a matchup hinging entirely on what a jury decides next year. And the clock is still ticking. Ironic that the fight the public is clamoring for above any other may never become a reality. The manly art of self-defense will become just that for Mike Tyson in '92. Not in a ring, but in a courtroom.
And of course, Nick, another big question, the one fueled because of that Cooper fight that night in Atlanta. Had it been Mike Tyson in that ring instead of smoking Bert Cooper, would Evander Holyfield still be ruling the world today?
Well, I'd have serious doubts about that, Fred. We'll coming up later in our hour special on the Sports Year in Review, some of the refreshing exceptions to the rule.
But coming right up next, we'll have a little bit of an NCAA question for you. Duke, of course, wiped them all out in college basketball, but Miami, Florida, and the rest, some burning questions left behind on the gridiron.
When I get a sinus headache, the whole house feels it.
I feel so bad to see my mom suffer like that.
The pain, the pressure, it's hard to describe.
She's just not herself.
I'm just not me.
Tylenol Sinus understands. Only Tylenol Sinus gel caps have 2 maximum strength ingredients in easy-to-swallow gel cap form to relieve the pressure and the pain.
It stops the pain so I can be me again.
Tylenol Sinus, the strength you need from the name you trust.
Many believe it was the innovative spirit of Europe that inspired him.
I can't wait till the 28th. I'm gonna make you my girlfriend.
You don't have to sit here and listen to this moron.
I'm gonna make sure you kiss me good with those big lips.
I'm scared, Mike. No, don't kick me. I'm fighting.
You're gonna see senior citizens with head rags running down the street, teenagers jumping behind the bushes saying, "What's happening?"
Now don't with me. I'm not with nobody. I'm not with this. I'm here because I'm the manager. That's 5 minutes.
I'll be having a fling with a pretty young thing till early morning.
You're like with MTV, huh?
Yeah.
Don't ask me that question. That's a ridiculous question.
I answered that thing 5 times already.
Yeah, if you persist, this interview today is over, I guarantee you.
I have never, ever, ever seen a game officiated as poorly as what this was officiated.
I'm so happy, I'm so happy that I was a part of this organization, and the players were great to me, and I just wish I had a chance to say thanks to them, because no one blamed me for that game, and they were all supportive, and that helps a lot.
I warned you, you get him straight out.
Nick, I told you, lay off Hanley, man. He's going to walk out of this place.
Well, Fred, like I said, and somebody else said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And on that subject, I don't think Hanley's going to be breaking any bread with that table in the future. But an interesting thing about the Giants, a lot of people talk in New York now, is that Bill Parcells knew it was a sinking ship and got out at the perfect moment.
Well, the two things I think they missed all year, Mark Bavaro, the tight end, the spiritual leader of that team, that was downplayed, and also Bill Belichick going to Cleveland, where he's done a heck of a job turning things around there.
But it's easy to criticize, and virtually it's very much the same team that won it all.
Interesting story. But we've got another one for you now as we take a gander at the collegiate scene. The women's basketball team at the University of Tennessee, the Lady Vols, they won the national title for the third time in 5 years this year. And there was thought the men's picture could be almost as clear-cut. That was until, of course, Coach K's boys duked it out, as our Dan Hicks explains.
UNLV swaggered into its second straight Final Four with an aura of invincibility. The defending champs brought a 45-game winning streak into their semifinal game with Duke, but after 8 Final Four appearances without a national championship, the Blue Devils were no longer just happy to be there. They fought the Rebels with a cause. UNLV trailed by 2 when it looked for its final shot, but without the leadership of Greg Anthony, who had just fouled out, the Rebel shot was won in the dark. And the unthinkable had happened. The shark had suddenly lost his teeth, and the joke was on UNLV.
We didn't read the article that said bring on the Rebels and send out the clowns, and we didn't lose by 20.
The Blue Devils then rose to the occasion against Kansas, and Coach Mike Krzyzewski and Duke could finally call themselves national champions. College football only wishes its champions could be as clear-cut. Colorado came into its New Year's night Orange Bowl matchup with Notre Dame as the consensus #1. But earlier in the afternoon at the Citrus Bowl, the only unbeaten team in the country had not only beaten Nebraska, it made it look easy. And Georgia Tech coach Bobby Ross casted his own vote.
I think we won. We're undefeated. We should be #1.
Later that night in Miami, it looked like Ross would get his wish. Colorado was leading Notre Dame 10-9, and just 65 seconds separated the Buffaloes from their first national championship. But that was more than enough time for the Rockets' final collegiate liftoff. But Regib Ismail's 91-yard punt return was all for show. A clipping penalty brought it back, and the debate had just begun. For the first time in 13 years, the voters split the championship.
I've been told that in the United Press voting that Georgia Tech edged us by 1 point.
The boos turned into cries for a playoff. A new consortium of conferences and bowls, including Notre Dame, was formed in the offseason to help provide a national championship matchup in the postseason. But college football's new bowl alliance still won't take effect this season.
Here's the snap. The kick is airborne. It is good! Wide to the right. Miami is going to win.
And when Miami knocked Florida State from this season's #1 spot, it once again set the stage for another national debate. Miami and Washington are the lone unbeatens, but will be on opposite coasts January 1st. So New Year's Day '92 may be bringing up the same old question. Who is #1?
There's no doubt. In any case, we're going to have to wait till '92 to find out. But for landslides, there was the Heisman Trophy. Michigan wide receiver Desmond Howard won it by the biggest margin since a guy named O.J. 23 years ago, Fred.
You wonder why everybody else went to New York. Nice place to break here, but we've still got 30 minutes to go, beginning with Irvin Magic Johnson, the ups and the downs.
And welcome back. It's the Sports Year in Review. We've already seen how 1991 produced perhaps the most electrifying World Series in history and an unforgettable Super Bowl. But for thudding impact, there's the Magic Johnson story.
No question about it, Nick. And what a tale it is. One of astronomical highs and canyon-esque lows. Indeed, there was magic in the air for Irvin Johnson, especially in the spring. In April, Johnson dealt the biggest assist of his or any career. It was number 9,888, one more than the great Oscar Robertson, and the new standard, the all-time record.
If you're listening, Dad, I just want to thank you and tell you that I love you so much. And to Mom, thank you too.
And it got better. The Lakers were able to buck the odds and knock off the Houston Rockets, the Golden State Warriors, and finally, the favored Portland Trail Blazers en route to the finals. All this with Magic leading the way. And then the finals, and the much-anticipated M&M matchup, Michael versus Magic. Both tried to play the individual angle down, but that was virtually impossible. When the smoke cleared away, it was Jordan's Bulls winning the title 4-1, denying Magic Johnson his 6th NBA crown. The offseason seemed to be full of promise for Magic Johnson. The one basketball accomplishment Johnson had never achieved finally came his way: selection to the United States Olympic basketball team. After winning titles at every level of the game, he would now get a shot at a gold medal. Johnson became the game's international ambassador when his Lakers played a preseason tournament in Paris. But after the team's arrival back in the States, and just 1 week into the regular season in which Johnson had not played a single game, Magic called a news conference. There was no preparing for the announcement that was to come.
Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers.
Johnson has never in his basketball career, high school, collegiate, or professional, ever backed down from a battle on the court. But now he is in the fight of his life and the fight for other lives, a drum major in the march against AIDS.
So harsh reality has hit. Magic Johnson has the AIDS virus, but this effervescent superstar who transcends sports is proving it again in the most monumental struggle of his life. He's hardly in hiding and certainly not wallowing in self-pity. What he's doing is trying to beat the odds and, above all, help others.
Hey, I'm here, I'm living, I'm gonna be here for a long time, and there's really no sense in changing, you know? Because once I change, then I'm gone.
Johnson's attitude is this is just another challenge, even though this is adversity that could kill him. He admits, though, to stumbling at the start of his public admission by sending out a message with mixed signals.
My message started off with safe sex instead of saying no sex at all, which is the safest sex, especially for young people. That's my message to them. So I did not say that at the beginning. So that's where you come on. That's where people attack me. But that's fine because I learned from them.
The tabloids pounced on his story, but Johnson says his role is to be messenger about the deadly dangers of AIDS and not worry about how he's perceived.
I'm not out here to please the public or anybody else. I'm out here to make sure lives are saved. And by doing that, they can say what they want to say. They can make me the GOAT, no hero, this, that. It's not really concerning me.
Not a single advertiser, including any food products, have dropped Johnson as a spokesman. And President Bush appointed him to the AIDS Commission, where Magic says his goal is to help break down the barriers that have prevented medical research from finding a cure.
And to help people, you know, no matter how they got the disease, you know, it doesn't matter, heterosexual, gays, whatever, we're all in the same pot. And we have to now come up with something that can help us all live.
As for ever weaving any more magic on a basketball court, Johnson says if voted in, he may play in the NBA All-Star Game in February and on the U.S. Olympic team in Barcelona next summer.
And the reason I'm not playing now is because, see, I want to play like Magic Johnson. And if I played like Magic Johnson, then it would take some years off my life.
But in the most basic personal sense, Magic Johnson says he'll continue to confront the fear of what's happened to him head on.
After battle, more than half of it is your frame of mind. And if I give up, then it's over.
Magic says he and business partners want to buy an NBA franchise before 1992 is out. And as tragic as what's happened to him, if higher powers that be were looking for a perfect messenger to bring home the impact of AIDS to others, Fred, they couldn't do better than Magic Johnson.
Well, a lot of people, of course, aren't as well moneyed as Magic Johnson and suffer from this disease and its symptoms, so he's got a big job ahead of him. Well, he is still very much in the spotlight, Johnson, with the Lakers tonight in Chicago. Their first visit there since, of course, losing the title series to the Bulls this past spring. Little ceremony with Michael Jordan, so he's very much on the scene. Coming up, we will take you back for all those tids and bits, ouch, you might have missed. Moments both memorable and mesmerizing.
Oh, but just ahead, some of the more notable and notorious personalities in sports, 1991. Stay with us.
Well, Nick, I think you will agree that what makes our job the most fun are the people that we come across. I mean, we get to see the Jekylls and the Hydes and everybody in between.
It makes it fun and fascinating. You're right. I know I've never had a dull moment in all my years covering Mike Tyson. And he was at it again this year. We saw athletes with notoriety, personality, wit, wisdom, and the rest. And our Jim Huber has details.
And so they put whistle to lips now, ready to blow this year to an end shortly. Mercifully for some, the Cleveland Indians, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Road Warrior Sacramento Kings, just to name a few. 3 awfully solid cases of mistaken identity. But others would have this year go on forever. To what well do grown men go to find themselves? Is there a cup from which Jimmy Connors, for example, drank to somehow recall his youth for a few very special, nearly overwhelming nights at the U.S. Tennis Open? If there is such a cup, those with fists raised in glory along with him would gladly invest. Perhaps George Foreman merely shared his. Once a scowling menace, boxing enemy number 1, he gained weight, years, and a smile, and plodded through a succession of Tanktown Charlies before losing the heavyweight championship in a decision and made the Tonight Show because of it. Some recalled their tender years, others were in theirs when the spotlight came. John Daly, just 24, and only a legend with his driver, used that and the other 13 clubs in his bag to absolutely overwhelm the PGA Championship. But that driver, that driver turned him Bunyan-esque. Deion Sanders, just a baby himself, even had to use a helicopter at times to keep up with one of the toughest schedules in history, becoming the first man ever to play for 2 different teams, in 2 different sports, in the same city, at the same time. The NFL Falcons on Sunday, the Major League Braves on Monday. Strength of body, strength of character. American League umpire Steve Palermo somehow found the latter, taking a bandit's bullet and losing the use of his legs for a great while, brought back during the World Series to the grateful cheers of a nation that cared. Character within. Ask Lions offensive lineman Mike Utley, carried into a life of paralysis during a game with the Rams, his neck broken, but not his spirit, they say. Or Tommy Lasorda, who somehow managed to endure the tragic death of his son, absorbing himself in the furious pennant race that went to the final weekend instead. Or the pitcher Dave Dravecky, who became a giant of another sort, losing his arm to cancer but not his heart. Or Lyle Alzado, whose personal struggle with cancer became a national cause célèbre when he linked the cancer with steroid use. Or Bo Jackson, whose hip injury in a Raiders uniform gave way to rumors of permanent disability and dismissal by the baseball Royals, only to claw his way back to a memorable job with the White Sox. Or Willie Shoemaker, who rides a wheelchair now instead of a thoroughbred, thanks to a car accident. His dreams now of saddling winners as a trainer. But he is dreaming still, nonetheless. To dream, to fight. It has sadly become a bit of a cliche in our business. But imagine for a moment if Steve Palermo had not. If Lyle Alzado or Mike Utley could not. If Daly hadn't dreamed, and Foreman hadn't believed, and Sanders hadn't dared. But one thing, when the whistle does blow this year to an end, none of them will stop.
Oh, what's so inspiring about Dave Dravecky and all those others is how they could deal with adversity, the ones who had to, and come shining through.
Well, there are, I think, examples for us all, especially Dave Dravecky. Never stopped smiling throughout that entire ordeal. And then guys like Deion Sanders, can you believe he actually has a chance to go to the Super Bowl this year? He's loving every minute.
A lot of people never believed it. I hope Jimmy Connors personally never quits it. Look at George Foreman. Lost his hair, gained a few tons, and captured the imagination of the country.
He is a big, big man in more ways than one. Up next, we've got achievements and milestones indelibly etched in our minds. Those good and those not so good. We wax nostalgic when CNN Sports Year in Review continues.
And welcome back. Nick Charles with Fred Hickman and a CNN special, The Sports Year in Review.
And we're going to continue with our trip down memory lane, but not before Dan Hicks tells us what's behind curtain number one. What's happening on CNN Sports tonight, Dan?
Thanks, guys. We've got about a year's worth of hoops, I think, on the NBA schedule tonight, but none bigger than the one out in Chicago where the Bulls and Lakers renewed acquaintances. For the first time since last year's finals, it was a magical evening indeed. Magic Johnson was in Chicago Stadium, honored before the game. We'll have reaction from him, as well as his good friend Michael Jordan, who was up to his usual tricks. It was a great matchup featuring the two best teams from the Eastern and Western conferences. We'll have all the highlights from around the NBA as well as a standout play of the day. We think you're going to enjoy it. Join Hannah, Storm, and me at the top of the hour, right after Nick and Fred finish out the year. Guys?
Well, thanks, Dan. Welcome back to the Sports Year in Review. And Fred, track and field exploded onto the calendar this summer. It happened in Tokyo at the World Championships.
That's right. August the 30th, as a matter of fact, was the date. American long jumper Mike Powell broke the record they said could not be broken at all. 29 feet, 4.5 inches. That is the longest jump in the books. Breaks Bob Beeman's record. Of course, that was a mark which stood for some 23 years.
And most thought would stand forever. It was a shock, and taking nothing away from Powell's brilliant achievement, I always figured Carl Lewis would be the guy to beat Beeman's mark. But Lewis was on a mission as well at that same Tokyo meet, blasting to a new world record in the 100-meter dash, 9.86 seconds.
A couple of shots heard around the world. But those weren't the only great achievements or milestones reached in sport this year. And here's our Bob Lorenz to chronicle some significant others.
Our picture book begins with a storybook year for 17-year-old Monica Seles, the little girl who became the dominant player as she assumed the throne of women's tennis. First by capturing the Australian Open, then adding the French in June and the U.S. Open in September. Missing was the Wimbledon jewel, which went to Steffi Graf. On the men's side, it was a year of parity in the Grand Slam. German Boris Becker claimed the Australian, American Jim Courier the French, German Michael Stich took Wimbledon, and Sweden Stefan Edberg claimed the U.S. Open. Team France will dance into the new year as Davis Cup champions after routing the United States for its first title since 1932. In golf, the U.S. posted a major winner in Payne Stewart, who came out swinging from a back injury to take the U.S. Open. But the most revered of events on American soil, the Masters, was a perfect fit for Welshman Ian Woosnam. As for the 120th British Open, it was a cinch for Ian Baker Finch as he won in a runaway. And a hot October day turned into history for Chip Beck as he shot just his second official round of 59 in the Las Vegas Invitational. 13 birdies, 5 pars, and a $1 million bonus. On the fast track, Rick Mears stood out among his peers as he became only the third four-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. Meanwhile, Harry Gant enjoyed a latter-year streak of success that's never been equaled in modern racing history by taking the checkered flag in 6 consecutive NASCAR events. And when it came to the biggest race, the first Saturday of May, Strike the Gold lived up to its name by winning the Kentucky Derby. The Pittsburgh Penguins lived the best and worst of times. They captured their first ever Stanley Cup by beating Minnesota, but the summer-long celebration was tempered by the initial sickness and subsequent death of head coach Bob Johnson from a brain tumor. We bid farewell to other sports heroes, Red Grange, Leo DeRocher, and Chucky Mullins. We also saw the end of a career as Sugar Ray Leonard said he was done for good after yet another comeback. In baseball, we saw the history of Chicago's Comiskey Park give way to the wrecking ball, while all the remains of the Orioles in Memorial Stadium are memories as they move into a new home in the new year.
Well, they say the new Oriole Park is supposed to be the best yet.
And New Comiskey isn't bad either.
It isn't. You know, I covered Sugar Ray Leonard from the time he was an amateur, Fred, and I always thought that he would know, be the first to know when it was time to leave. Well, he found out in February. It was a stark realization for him, the way he went out.
Well, and another thing, of course, happening during the course of the year was that great U.S. golf victory in the Ryder Cup. Kiowa Island off the coast of South Carolina, a course built strictly for the event, and the Americans were gaining the cup from the Europeans.
Fascinating year, and you look ahead and you say, what's going to happen to a guy like John Daly? He just touched the sky at that age. Where does he go from here?
I don't know, but he can come teach me how to drive, I'll tell you that. Next up, we have got the hardcore jollies, the well-hidden, the other neat stuff from the year gone by, just in case you missed it. And welcome back to the Sports Year in Review. And Nick, now we get to get into the Wayback Machine for one of our more enjoyable endeavors. Digging just a little bit deeper for the stuff not always making the highlight reels and the stuff which seems to make them all. There was the good, Ken Caminiti showing us how to please from his knees. There was the bad, Brett Butler having his voice raised an octave or two by Junior. Well, I've heard of sixth men getting involved in the game, but Del Harris, that's a little bit ridiculous, don't you think? I'm sure Michael Adams does. Let me see, we've had the good and the bad, so that leaves the ugly. Jose Tejeda at the Pan Am Games, a perfect one-point dismount. Ow. This derivation of the old hidden ball trick, the old bug in the ear routine. And this deft pass from Manute Pole qualifies as ugly, don't you think? The only way to stop Ken Caminiti from snaring this pop-up is to hit him with a chair or something. So the security guy in Atlanta obliges. Errol Tucker of the Orlando Thunder on the punt return. He can see it now. Name up in lights, a spot in the NFL, endorsements, even our play of the day. But he never thought he'd make it doing this. Now, let's go for a little spin, shall we? Tyrone Enoch takes everybody to school and makes the beautiful assist. And speaking of being undressed, the Budweiser Daredevil tumbles right out of his trousers. And Chris Sabo of the Reds is a bit underdressed this at that. See what I mean? All right, calm down, dear. It's all over now. As far as the fantastic is concerned, you just cannot beat Michael Jordan. And how about high schooler Dee Barnes falling out of bounds? The behind-the-back heave, nothing but nylon. And how about the huddle on the fly routine by these California preps? But the coup de grace may well be Rodney McRae taking it to and through the wall. Oh, well, I guess a nose by any other name doesn't always smell as sweet.
Oh, man.
Man, that hurts every time I see McRae go through the wall, no question.
Hurts you. How do you think he feels about it? Pretty interesting year, huh?
Yeah, well, you know, it's been a lot of fun in all kinds of ways, and I think the good always outweighs the bad in sport. We have had an awfully good time. You and I have, you know, made the, hit it down the dusty trail, as it were, a few times, and I guess probably the most memorable thing for me would, I guess, be the Super Bowl and that whole, you know, the whole scenario going down there with the Oregon golf and all.
I think really this year took a back seat on the field to what happened off, particularly with Magic Johnson, one of the biggest stories, and certainly in the history of sports, and also with Mike Tyson, what's ahead for him. And speaking of what's ahead, we've got the Winter and Summer Olympics coming up in '92. The NBA players are going to be there in Barcelona, so the gold is a cinch. We'll see how that comes out, though, in terms of public perception and what they say about it.
And be sure to get your rosters together for baseball spring training, because there are going to be a lot of different people in different places and making a lot of money.
Yeah, nice thing is, new Super Bowl champion, we know that for sure, in deference to the New York Giants, who won't be there, of course. But you looked at Minnesota and Pittsburgh in the Stanley Cup Finals, how unlikely that was, about as unlikely as Atlanta and Minnesota in the World Series.
Well, we've got our work cut out for us next year before we get ready for this show. Squeezing a year's worth of sports, of course, into 1 hour is kind of like getting a gallon of water to fit into an eyedropper, but we gave it a shot, all right?
It was a year that held our attention. Stunning news off the court, out of the ring, and then on the field, races and competition you just wanted to last forever. The best part is we'll have a fresh new slate to work with in about, what, a few days?
Yeah, we'll get down on the typewriters right away. But stay tuned now, because Sports Tonight is next with a half hour's worth of the current affairs. So long for now.
By the support from women and how moved they have been.
At year's end, Warren Beatty and Annette Bening were looking forward to more than just reviews of Bugsy. Benning's pregnancy made her ineligible to slink around as the Catwoman in Batman Returns. Sean Young went so far as to show up at Warner Brothers in costume for the part, but Michelle Pfeiffer won it instead. When Roseanne Arnold wasn't singing, she was talking. She accused her parents of abusing her when she was growing up. They denied it. Celebrities were coming clean everywhere. Julia Phillips infuriated most of Hollywood with her volume, "You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again." And Tinseltown was talking about a caustic BBC documentary series called Naked Hollywood. One segment of the 6-part series had to be scrapped when Paramount refused to grant permission for the producers to use clips from the studio's films. Clips that would have been necessary to complete a stinging look at super producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, even though Simpson and Bruckheimer consented to do interviews for the show.
Simpson and Bruckheimer are behaving like spoiled kids. And I think that Paramount Pictures is behaving like a kind of indulgent nanny. And I think that, there's an act of censorship. We're not talking about Watergate here. We are only talking about entertainment journalism. Even so, it's an act of censorship.
LaToya Jackson published her expose of the Jackson family, again alleging familial abuse. And Milli Vanilli came clean this year, admitting they were only lip-syncing for anonymous vocalists instead of doing their own vocals. I love you. And now you know why. In early December, Milli Vanilli member Rob Pilatus was hospitalized after a suicide attempt, an attempt he made after putting in a phone call to the Los Angeles Times. Police had to lure the performer off a 9th-floor balcony at a posh Los Angeles hotel. Paul Rubens, the actor who plays Pee Wee Herman, sparked a storm of controversy when he was arrested in Florida in an adult movie theater and charged with indecent exposure. Rubens accepted a plea bargain involving a fine and public service work in a Florida courtroom. He also accepted a rapturous welcome at the MTV Awards a little after his arrest.
Heard any good jokes lately?
Johnny Carson looked forward to getting out from behind the desk. He announced he was stepping down as the host of The Tonight Show in favor of Jay Leno. Long-running nighttime soap opera Dallas had its final episode. The team of Naomi and Winona Judd bid a tearful farewell to the country music world. Naomi retired from performing due to a serious liver condition. That left her daughter a solo act. But the mock rock band Spinal Tap is back together.
We're proud to take into the 90s as a new mature Spinal Tap.
I think you're right.
More successes, successors, surprises, and scandals are sure to come in 1992. Dennis Michael, CNN Entertainment News, Hollywood.
Still to come on the Year in Entertainment, the big 3 broadcast networks continue to lose viewers at a rapid pace. Are they heading for extinction? We'll look back at a very eventful year in television.
1991 was a year many movie makers and studios would like to forget. Several films expected to generate big bucks fell flat. CNN's Sherry Sylvester looks back at which movies made the cut and which should have been left on the cutting room floor.
Money. It don't care whether I'm good or not. There's only one thing I like better. Other people's money.
It was a year in which filmmakers seemed to spend more money making movies than audiences spent seeing them. Moviegoers paid more, saw less, and studios were stuck with big-ticket items in unclaimed packages. Madonna dared, no one cared. Few paid to see Kathleen Turner as a law enforcer, Dustin Hoffman as a lawbreaker, Harrison Ford as a lawyer, or William Hurt as a doctor. Billy Crystal hit as a cowboy, but the lines were short to hear Sylvester Stallone tell jokes or Alec Baldwin repeat marriage vows. Even Woody Allen seemed lost at the mall. What moviegoers longed for, paid for, was fantasy, from futuristic to fairy tale, from classic pirate to politically correct pirate.
Men and women go up and down on the scale of the movies, but the movies are bigger than all of them. And when you see a fresh one, when you see it just pop, you walk out and you want to go have pie. I always can call those pie movies.
He won 7 Oscars for Dances with Wolves, but Kevin Costner took a couple of pies in the face for his depiction of Robin Hood. One critic dubbed him Dan Quayle with a sword, but he built a forest and they came. Poor moviegoers surrendering nearly $165 million to rich movie makers.
So if the Terminator battled Robin Hood, who would win?
A very good question. I'm gonna get...
It cost more than any other movie of 1991. New technology was developed just to get it onto the screen. T2 beat Robin Hood in the box office battle, grossing over $200 million. The word is still out on whether it broke even.
Nowadays, an average film, 4 people in a room with a couple of exterior sequences is costing almost $30 million. So I think the whole average is sort of going up to where a movie like this has become an endangered species.
He is talking about Hook, but a cost-conscious Hollywood emerged this year. MGM Pathé had a hit with Thelma and Louise, but financial troubles and management turmoil kept them in court much of the year. Money troubles as well for Orion, with a dozen releases postponed, and the monster hit The Addams Family sold off to Paramount to raise quick cash. That brought a Merry Christmas to Paramount's new studio chief, Brandon Tartikoff, whose pet project went over like so much tarnished tinsel.
Hey, mister, are you gonna die?
Wow! Every year has its Howard the Duck. This time, foul was cried with Hudson Hawk.
I had an emotional investment in Hudson Hawk, I had a big input into that, and I was really surprised by the malice of the critical press. And not really, at a certain point, it stopped being about the film, and it was really about me and Joel Silver. And, I've examined that, because I was really, taken aback by it.
But the critics did not keep Willis out of the game. He rebounded by year's end with The Last Boy Scout.
Another tragic tale of wasted youth. You're nobody. Don't tell anyone.
Movies about the mob made for mixed reviews, dubbed young Tommy Guns in reference to its juvenile cast. Mobsters failed to hit its target audience, but veteran Warren Beatty took the gamble to portray Bugsy Siegel and met Annette Bening in the process.
The man invented Las Vegas. That was fascinating to me. He was passionately in love with this woman who inspired him to do that. He named the hotel after her, and at the same time, he was sufficiently complex and almost ridiculous in his attitude about his own vanity.
Julia Roberts scored with Sleeping with the Enemy, but Dying Young was left waiting at the box office 1 week after her wedding plans were left waiting at the Fox lot.
Success is sort of a bastardized term. Gratification for me as an actor and as a person, and it doesn't have to do with sort of what people gauge as success in this industry.
Death was only profitable for Macaulay Culkin.
Here I am, alive and well.
The half-pint millionaire's demise in My Girl was a welcomed Mac attack and helped enliven a rigor mortis season.
It's very strange in the film world, much more competitive. A lot more envy goes on. A lot of people wish for your failure rather than your success.
Barbra Streisand took another turn behind the camera in a project given the go-ahead by her ex-hairdresser turned ex-lover turned ex-studio boss, John Peters.
There are autobiographical splashes in the entire film. That doesn't mean that it's autobiographical, certainly, but everything in it are things that move me and that I understand implicitly.
Jodie Foster went behind the camera for the first time with Little Man Tate. The first step in a new direction was taken by Sean Penn as well, and newcomer John Singleton beat Spike Lee at his own game when his Boys in the Hood became the highest-grossing black genre film in history.
In 1968 or 9, when we went off the air, we were done. And here we are in 1991 saying now we're done.
New beginnings were matched by final chapters, most notably the 6th and the studio says final voyage of the Starship Enterprise, and the final nightmare for Freddy Krueger. Others hit their stride.
When Steve Spielberg sent me the script of the new version of Cape Fear, I wasn't interested at all. I didn't relate to it, and I didn't want to do it.
But he did, and Spielberg's inclination to remake the story of Peter Pan may have been on target as well. Even veteran Dustin Hoffman enjoyed the sentimental journey enough to hook his costume.
I have the shoes, I have the coat, I have the wig, I have the teeth, I have the hat.
Yes. No.
Yes.
You're Peter? Yes.
I'm still working on getting the mustache.
My great and worthy opponent?
And only a lucky few in 1991 could collect their own cinematic souvenirs. Sherry Sylvester, CNN Entertainment News, Hollywood.
Welcome back to CNN's special look at the year in entertainment. And joining me now in our Hollywood studios to discuss the year in movies are Richard Schickel of Time Magazine and Martin Grove of The Hollywood Reporter. And gentlemen, a banner year it was not. What went wrong?
Just about everything, I would say.
We probably look at it wrong, you know, and we divide it into this arbitrary 12 months. I don't know that anything especially went wrong this year that's any wronger than happened any other year, you know.
I mean, too many big pictures that didn't work but cost too much. Too many good pictures that, you know, came along and got marketed poorly and never realized the funds that they could have at the box office.
But so what else is new? You know, that happens every year.
Year like every year. Every year is a recession that we are supposedly
in. Yeah, I mean,
in.
I think that hurt, but, and I think it's perfectly true, you know, the conventional wisdom that there weren't that many really gotta-see movies out there over the year.
But really, to the credit of the public, those films that they really wanted to see, they were out there to see them. Terminator 2, the recession didn't keep anybody away. Robin Hood, same thing.
What about star power this year?
One would have thought Robin Hood might have kept somebody away.
In the best of all worlds, yes. Well.
In the best of all worlds, Julia Roberts was supposed to bring them in for Dying Young. She did not do that. Many blamed it on the title.
I will say, in her defense, she is the best thing about Hook. I mean, she's charming in that film.
It's not much comfort to the Dying Young producers.
No, I just thought I'd say something nice about Julia Roberts, who hasn't had the best year of her life, I imagine.
That's for sure. But in the case of Dying Young, you could say they almost deserved it, because everybody who follows this business from the inside out knows you don't put the word dying in a movie title.
Okay, I didn't mean to take Dying Young and just stick to that, but the star power in Hollywood this particular season, did it work? Did it bring people into the theater?
I think star power is vastly overrated, not just this year, but any year. I mean, I think that, you know, some of the best movies of this year, as in many other years, were movies that have done well. I mean, there's no star, you know, in Beauty and the Beast. And it's a terrific movie, and it's done extremely well. And I think that's been true since ever, you know, in modern times at any rate, that, you know, it's ideas that attract people, gimmicks, that sort of, I mean, there was no star, to go back to Julia Roberts, there was no star as such in Pretty Woman, but it cleaned up. I mean, I think there is a tendency to overpay stars, and the reason is because, you know, to a studio executive, you can go back to the conglomerate and say, no, I did everything possible. I paid all that money and I bought a star and it still didn't work.
It's
self-defense.
Right.
Yeah.
What about the financial woes certain studios this year? MGM, Pathé, Orion. Does that affect the product?
I think it affects everybody's morale in town here. I mean, you know, people feel like they're in a business that isn't going the way it's supposed to.
Well, also, when you have studios in severe financial distress, they don't have the money to market the movies that they have, which may be good movies. Look at Orion. They made The Addams Family. That picture, they had to sell off to Paramount in order to support themselves, you know, week by week by week. So they lost what has turned into a monster
I mean,
hit.
think of that studio. They had actually 2 extremely substantial successes out there in Silence of the Lambs, and before that, Dances with Wolves. And, you know, even so, they're in a disaster area.
Well, look at, again, Orion in the case of Little Man Tate. Here's a film where Jodie Foster was on the cover of Time magazine. And when she was on that front cover, and being on that cover sells movie tickets, the film was in limited release. It wasn't even playing wide. Orion had kind of, you know, lost it. They were dealing with their problems.
One thing that is not a problem, it seems that this is the season to be jolly. Box office is finally going up. Our forecast for next year, do you think that the box office now during this holiday season will have some sort of momentum to bring us healthy box office in the coming year ahead?
Well, I think it's sure off to a superb start. I mean, this was a very good Thanksgiving. When you take the pre-Thanksgiving week and the Thanksgiving weekend, add them together, compare them to last year, we were down about 6%. That's very good in the midst of a terrible recession.
It's just really a question of whether something out of this pack, this rush of late-year releases, will do, say, what Dances with Wolves did last year, carry on through into the next year and give people kind of a running start.
Okay, well, we can't carry on any longer because we are out of time. Richard, I thank you. Marty, I will see you soon.
Look forward to it.
Okay. And our special look at the year in entertainment will continue in just a moment, so please stay with us.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Still to come on the year in entertainment, the big 3 broadcast networks continue to lose viewers at a rapid pace. Are they heading for extinction? We'll look back at a very eventful year in television.
Also, sales of concert tickets and recorded music reflected the recessionary mood of the country this year, with some notable exceptions in the metal category. Those stories coming up when we return.
World News.
Television in 1991 saw its share of controversy with primetime dramas and sitcoms tackling issues such as teenage sex, date rape, and homosexuality. But real-life dramas also kept viewers tuned in as television covered world events like never before. And 1991 also saw the business of television become tougher than ever, especially for the big 3 broadcast networks. Cheryl Washington looks back at the year in TV.
1991 will be known as the year the recession hit network television hard, and network executives made ominous predictions about the future of over-the-air broadcasting. The nets claim cable, with strong programming such as HBO's The Josephine Baker Story, was eroding the network's viewer and advertiser base. The nets battled the FCC over so-called FinCEN rules, regulations that prohibited the big 3 from profiting from the syndication of such shows as The Cosby Show.
The rules deny America's 3 most logical competitors in the global communications business, the 3 networks, the opportunity to compete fully abroad.
Those restrictions prompted longtime NBC entertainment chief Brandon Tartikoff to leave the Peacock network to run Paramount.
It's sort of like going from working at or owning a Toys R Us to getting the whole shopping center to play with.
1991 was also a year in which real-life events kept the nation and the world glued to the tube. So much so that TV Guide named Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf its TV Person of the Year.
Well, there's anti-aircraft gunfire going into the sky.
There was unprecedented war coverage in the Persian Gulf, a failed coup in the Soviet Union, the confirmation of William Gates as a director of the CIA.
So help me God.
Judge Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the Supreme Court, that after dramatic testimony with some of the most sexually explicit language ever on TV. As Anita Hill charged she was sexually harassed by Thomas, her former boss.
On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess.
And yet more sexually explicit language was on television when William Kennedy Smith went on trial for alleged sexual assault, and the courtroom action was covered live. Sex was also big in prime time. LA Law had a lesbian storyline. Quantum Leap was protested for a gay storyline. Beverly Hills 90210 dealt with issues from date rape to the loss of virginity. And yes, Doogie Howser also lost his virginity.
I was afraid it wouldn't be any good. No, you're wonderful.
Then there was pregnancy, both real and just for the storyline. Deborah Norville went on maternity leave from Today. Ratings for the ailing Today began to climb when Norville was replaced permanently by Katie Couric, who later had a baby of her own.
I have now narrowed the field of sperm donors to 4.
Designing Women's Annie Potts was pregnant in real life, so her TV character was artificially inseminated. Candice Bergen's Murphy Brown character found herself in the family way. On Married with Children, the real-life pregnancy of Katie Sagal was written into the storyline, but it was turned into an Al Bundy dream when Sagal tragically lost the baby in her 7th month of pregnancy. Tragedy also struck the royal family when star Red Fox died of a heart attack. And Michael Landon's new TV series, Us, was canceled when he died. Critically acclaimed but low-rated shows were canceled. Twin Peaks, 30-something, and China Beach are gone.
You know, we all have to program 22 hours a week in prime time. We program to a large and varied audience, varied tastes, and that's rather apparent. And you can't put a highly innovative program in every time period.
Johnny Carson announced he'll leave The Tonight Show. NBC named Jay Leno as his replacement.
Well, it won't be tremendously different. I mean, obviously, if people sort of like the things I've been doing when I guest host, it'll be similar to that. We'll try to bring our own pieces to it.
This caused rumors that David Letterman will tell NBC to take a hike and jump ship for another network. So far, he stayed put. And then there's pay-per-view. The Holyfield Foreman fight draws a record pay-per-view audience. And there was the perennial drama at the Daytime Emmy Awards. Would All My Children's Susan Lucci finally win? But Finola Hughes of General Hospital took home the prize, making Susan Lucci a 12-time loser. Oh well, better luck next year. Cheryl Washington, CNN Entertainment News, New York.
Joining us right now, Howard Polskin of TV Guide and Brian Donlin, who is the TV writer for USA Today. We're going to talk about some of the things we just saw. Obviously, real life, a big part of television this past year.
Yeah, the good news about television this year was real news, no question about it. 3 big events, invasion of Kuwait, Judge Thomas hearings, and also we also had Magic Johnson announcing that he had the HIV virus on television, the invasion, and the events in the Soviet Union. Big, big events.
Anything to add to that, Brian?
I think what's interesting is that we saw a rejuvenation in television news, that when the big events came on TV, people did respond to newscasts. They have not stopped watching news. And we saw the growth of CNN. But what we saw also about CNN, the ratings went way up during the Gulf War. And I think a lot of people expected whenever there was a news event, the ratings would go way up. But when the Soviet coup came, the numbers didn't go way up. They kind of leveled off. So I think we found out that CNN is susceptible to the same thing that everyone's susceptible to, and that's the choices of the American public.
When we look back 10 years from now, we will look at those 4 events as really the highlights of the '91 season.
Probably a year that'll never be duplicated again.
Not news-wise.
Not news-wise.
No.
The other thing, every year we have the best, we have the worst. Let's talk about them, starting off with the best.
I liked I'll Fly Away. I think that's the best news series on television, in my estimation, no question about that.
Without a doubt, it's drama with a brain.
And the worst?
I
love to talk about the worst.
We don't have enough time for this. We have a half hour.
The worst show, not only of the year, of the decade, could be of the century when all is said and done, was NBC's Adventures with Mark and Brian, 2 radio disc jockeys trying to do a television show. Not funny.
When do you think they're going to learn that you can't really take guys from radio and put them on television? There's never been a success rate.
Well, video does definitely kill the radio star, except maybe for Larry King. You know, there is the exception to the rule, but radio guys just don't make it that well in television.
Isn't it odd that we talk about the best for just 2 seconds and the worst for 2 minutes?
The thing about the best things on television, the best shows I think, take time to develop. Murphy Brown, I think, is the case there. And one of my favorite shows is Cheers took some time. And I think Seinfeld is a case of a show that's really starting to develop.
You, Brian, I understand, are a particular fan of Seinfeld's show.
I think it's the show of the 90s. I think it's going to be the comedy that everybody talks about. I think, as of today, it is the best written comedy on television. I think just like a few years ago when Cheers and Murphy Brown were starting up and no one was really talking about them, they got small Emmy nominations like writing and directing. I think in the next couple of years they're going to get the acting nominations as well, and a lot of people are going to be watching Seinfeld.
But if Brian's right, that shows a fundamental shift in the way the public loves television programs, in that it takes time, it takes years, 2 or 3 years, for the public really to discover a show and embrace it. And I think, I tend to agree with Brian. I think it will be a very hot show this day.
The days of the big hit out of the box are over. It's not going to happen.
But I was going to say, in this day and age, networks don't want to stick around and pour a lot of money into a TV show to let the audience develop for it.
Well, it's going to be a rock and a hard place scenario for them. They're not going to get the big hits anymore out of the box because there isn't enough available audience to them. I mean, there is enough available audience. People are just choosing not to watch them.
Well, there's a lot more choices.
But what's going to happen, if you look at all the shows historically, Cheers, Murphy Brown we mentioned, L.A. Law, Hill Street Blues, all these programs were slow builds, and it took 2 or 3 years for them to become hits. That is the formula that makes television work. So they're going to have to make some deals in Hollywood in terms of the cost to make the structure work in order for that formula to prove a success.
A case in point as well is 48 Hours on CBS. All of a sudden, that has been around for a few years. It really languished in the bottom of the ratings. Now, all of a sudden, 48 Hours is a power on Wednesday night for CBS.
Let's move into next year, 1992. What do we see?
Well, the problem I see on the negative side is NBC is going to have big problems on Thursday night. Cosby won't be around probably next season. I see L.A. Law's ratings getting a lot weaker. Cheers does not excite me the way it used to, so I see problems for NBC next year on Thursday night. Overall problems for NBC, but specifically there.
Aspirin on Thursday nights for NBC and the Peacock, no doubt about it. But I think the big story in '92 is going to be late night television and Johnny Carson's departure. It's going to be a wide open field, and NBC may not be the kingpin they once were because of Johnny.
That'll be happening in May of '92. Brian Donlin, thank you. Howard, good to see you again. Howard Polskin. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Persian Gulf War and the recession here in the United States. Sales of concert tickets were particularly dismal this summer after a very impressive take in 1990. But as Mark Shearer reports, there were plenty of exceptions to prove the rule.
Battling a slumping economy, the summer touring scene saw too few crowds like this one at the Lollapalooza Festival, one of the few really successful tours. Acts like Steve Winwood and Whitney Houston were hurt by weak box office business.
People won't look back on the summer of '91 and say, wow, what a great year.
Record stores fought the recession too, as shipments dropped 11% in the first half of the year. There were victories here and there. Guns N' Roses releasing not one, but 2 popular albums at once. Collateral Damage, Axl Rose triggering a riot by fans in St. Louis. REM reached multi-platinum heights without touring.
Having just done an 11-month, 17-country tour, nobody wanted to even look at their instruments.
Natalie Cole interpreted her father's music. Michael Bolton reworked classic R&B. Metallica forged into the mainstream alongside Christian music crossover sensation Amy Grant. Hammer nailed down another hit album and walked off with lots of Grammys in New York. Quincy Jones with an armload more. Rappers like LL Cool J, NWA, and Ice Cube made headlines. Veteran rockers Jethro Tull, U2, Bob Seger, and John Mellencamp kept the faith. And a veteran child star, David Cassidy, launched a comeback tour.
It's like I Think I Love You, What Happened to the Bus. You know, boy, what impact I had.
At the annual Rock and Roll Hall of Fame dinner, the induction of legends like John Lee Hooker, the Impressions, and the Byrds had to wait while President Bush announced the bombing of Baghdad. The war prompted some musicians to help raise troop morale with Voices That Care. Others helped Sean Lennon revive his father's Give Peace a Chance. Whitney Houston's national anthem stirred Super Bowl fans, and Bette Midler's From a Distance comforted the troops and their families. With a system called SoundScan, Billboard magazine updated the way it charts the hits, and that may have contributed to a triumphant year for Nashville. With Garth Brooks leading the way, country artists stampeded to the top of the charts and earned themselves what, to some, was overdue recognition. Economic retrenchment seemed like an alien term to record companies who surrendered new contracts for huge sums to Aerosmith, Janet Jackson, the Rolling Stones, Michael Jackson. Jackson released a new album and came under attack from parents and children for violent and sexually suggestive imagery in a video, black or white. The year's big events included a gathering of Paul Simon fans in New York Central Park for a live concert cablecast. Don Henley enlisted Sting and Billy Joel to raise money to save Walden Woods from development. Among the musical milestones of 1991, MTV's 10th anniversary, Bob Dylan's 50th birthday, the 100th anniversary of Cole Porter's birth, and Carnegie Hall, and the 25th season of the Metropolitan Opera, which brought the world's most famous tenors to the same stage. The battle to break new artists was once again waged, and some of the victors in 1991 included CNC Music Factory, Mark Cohn, and Jesus Jones. And so, while it reverberates from a year marked by war and recession, the music world hopes for a future of peace and prosperity. Mark Shearer, CNN Entertainment News, New York.
Some people think sports figures are overpaid. Others believe that movie stars and rock stars make too much money. And this year, one of the big stories in the fashion world was the sky-high salaries of supermodels. CNN's Elsa Clench has more on that.
And what are you doing with all the money?
Saving and investing.
People these days, they talk about it all the time. God, it's a scandal how much money you girls make these days.
At the top of your profession, in any profession, you have to be sort of intelligent to get there.
Since Susie Parker made headlines in the 50s, there have been star models. Jean Shrimpton and Twiggy in the 60s, Lauren Hutton in the 70s, and E-Man and Jerry Hall in the 80s. Now in the 90s, fashion has ushered in the superstars, the glamorous, high-profile models who can demand as much as $10,000 a show. As they sometimes do 5 shows a day, their weekly salaries can quickly climb to 6 figures. Today's 10 girls at the top are Linda Evangelista, Yasmin Gori, Naomi Campbell, Claudia Schiffer, Karen Mulder, Helena Christensen, Nadege Dubos-Burtis, Tatiana Patez, Christy Turlington, and Cindy Crawford. The question the fashion industry is asking, are the models worth the money they get, especially in these times of recession, or does their high profile detract from the very clothes they're supposed to be selling? The models say they're worth every cent they get, and that their job is far from glamorous.
We're working most of the time, and you have to go to bed very early, don't go out, don't drink too much, and all this.
The way we live is not very glamorous at all. Always working very hard and traveling a lot, being by ourselves all the time, very busy schedules.
Photographer Dan Lecker says the superstars have a walk, a way of turning a smile, a presence that makes his job a lot easier.
Just like a very good photographer or a very good cameraman, if he makes the job well, I mean, if he does it well, then he's worth the money. And they do a very good job.
Designers are divided about whether the models are worth the money. Karl Lagerfeld, who does Fendi and Chanel as well as his own collection, is happy to pay up.
You know, the fees are high, but you get it back in a minute, huh? Because the photographers photograph only those. The runway photos make editorial all around the world, more than ever before. It doesn't look like showroom stuff and things like this. And, you know, I think they deserve the fee because it will not last forever. This is not a job where they can be for 20 years.
We're about clothes. I mean, I'm designing clothes. And the model, I use a model to express the attitude of the clothes. And the model is not the point. Then designers are paying a lot of money for nothing, because the idea is to focus on the clothes.
The jury is still out. If the superstars sell the clothes, they'll continue to get the high fees and perhaps even higher. For there's no doubt they give the shows glamour and excitement. And that thrills the audience, including retailers like Saks, Fifth Avenue's Helen O'Hagan. O'Hagan says some big designers like Giorgio Armani don't need superstar models.
Then there are other collections where the star models are really very important because, as we all know, they really photograph beautifully. Then those pictures are picked up all across the country. And a designer who maybe didn't have his strongest collection, he'll get a lot of press because of those girls.
And that will sell the clothes?
It will certainly sell the clothes.
Elsa Clench, CNN, New York.
Just as new celebrities emerge every year, others leave us for good. And as we continue our look back at the year in entertainment, we'd like to take this time to pay special tribute to the stars who passed away in 1991.
In a cottage made of chocolate cake and icing, every dream you dream is sure to be a nice dream.
Do it once more, just once. Ready? And
I think movies at their best are moving pictures. If you look back on your movie-going experience, you will remember pictures. You don't remember words.
When I got a saxophone when I was 13, I practiced 8 hours a day for 2 years. I wanted to get out of the Bronx.
Police say David Ruffin collapsed at a crack house hours before his death.
I'm an angel. Not one of the best, but I try.
I think every moment just gets a little more important after something like this.
They are not long, the days of wine and roses.
I'm Harry Reason.
There was no artifice in Harry. A manner as straight as you please.
All you have to do is be yourself. Besides, what I saw out there, no doctor has ever been able to do with him.
He was one of the great directors. They don't make people like Frank Capra anymore.
Here comes my baby back again. Life, Billy, life.
I have a life, I'm a father, I'm a husband, but I want to work.
The comedian collapsed with an apparent heart attack on the set of his new CBS television series, The Royal Family, during rehearsals at Paramount Studios.
Look! A cat! In a hat!
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
It has been Gene's ongoing inspiring of everyone who has worked on this show that has been so significant and that will be most significantly missed.
What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt.
The rock and roll artist and the rock and roll fan, they are basically very good, very decent, and very giving people.
Frida, I am proud of the 20 years I've spent in the mail service. And neither snow, nor rain, nor sleet, nor dogs ever kept me from my appointed rounds. But those blasted dogs tried.
Shows have one thing in common. They don't live forever. They come, curtain goes up, at some point the curtain goes down, just like life itself.
The Movado Museum Watch. The dial design chosen by the Museum of Modern Art for their purpose.
Year in entertainment. Please be sure to watch Showbiz Today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 22:30 GMT here on CNN. In Hollywood, I'm Lauren Sidney.
And in New York, I'm Bill Tosh. For everyone at Showbiz Today, thanks for watching.
hatred put the American system of checks and balances in the deep freeze. The problems discovered in the National Program Office helped launch a congressional drive to exercise effective oversight over black programs. But our examination indicates that until there are stronger checks and balances on this secret world, abuses will continue. I'm David Lewis, CNN Special Assignment.
The White House says there is no plan for unelected officials to become president in the event of nuclear war. Otherwise, no other comment on our report because it dealt with, quote, classified matters. When we return, secrets of the Gulf War. The day before the Gulf War broke out, Special Assignment Stephen Emerson had this story about the most secret units in the U.S. military.
The plan is for massive airstrikes against Iraqi targets if war breaks out. But CNN Special Assignment has learned that a substantial role has also been assigned to elite American ground forces throughout the Middle East. Known as Special Operations Forces, they will be used for counter-terrorist missions and hostage rescue operations. These units will also go behind enemy lines to spy on enemy positions, conduct guerrilla operations against communication centers and strategic weapon sites, and perhaps most importantly, guide U.S. planes and missiles to their targets.
They can perform direct action missions against targets such as command and control facilities. They can help guide weapons with surgical accuracy, pinpoint accuracy, and they are also prepared to conduct operations deep inside enemy territory.
Down on the ground, one of the commando's principal missions will be to guide American pilots and missiles to their targets. They do this by placing electronic beacons near the targets. The beacons emit a path of signals which the pilots and missiles can home in on. U.S. Air Force officials say it is vital to hit their targets accurately the first time around to remove Iraq's capacity to retaliate. Iraq has built nuclear weapons facilities, ballistic missile sites, and communication centers deep underground to avoid satellite detection. Only men on the ground can provide exact information about these targets.
There are some things that overhead means can tell you, and there are some things that it can't. You need people on the ground to tell you how many planes there are in a particular place, what troop movements are, what facilities look like, where things are.
To infiltrate behind Iraqi lines, the Special Forces will rely on secret aviation units, principally Task Force 160. Considered the best aviators in the military, Task Force 160 can fly in the pitch dark using night vision goggles, skimming just above treetops and power lines, conditions they are likely to face in any attacks on Iraqi targets. American military planners have been reluctant to use Special Operations Forces in the past decade, but they have now concluded that the effectiveness of big-ticket items like bombers can be greatly enhanced by using these elite ground forces. Stephen Emerson, CNN Special Assignment.
Following the Gulf War, Pentagon officials confirmed our report on the vital role U.S. Special Forces played on the ground in Iraq. When we come back, secrets of a former Nazi with presidential ambitions. Hundreds of photographs never before shown that disclosed a lot more than the TV preacher had admitted about his visits to a New Orleans prostitute. Harris also took a hard look at another of Louisiana's notorious celebrities, gubernatorial candidate, former Klansman and neo-Nazi, David Duke.
I was a teenage grand wizard.
Meet David Duke,
Let's make some real sound of the local KKK.
Running hard for governor of Louisiana.
Now I'm running for Louisiana's governor.
Running away from his past.
Let's talk about the past, all right? Ladies and gentlemen, I've certainly done things in my life I take back.
David Duke has a lot to take back.
My victory.
He's burned crosses. He sold Nazi books like this one, and The Hitler I Loved and Why. He's denied the Holocaust ever happened, and said the United States fought on the wrong side in World War II. But Duke is skilled at thwarting attempts to hold him accountable for his ideas.
Are you a menace representative? I don't think so.
Now that stuff's old now. I mean, the people of this state have heard everything there is to say about David Duke, and they like me. And anybody who brings it up now, people will see it as a cheap shot, which it is.
He's the ultimate con man. He's not telling the truth. And the truth is that he is a great admirer of National Socialism. He's a great admirer of Adolf Hitler. And he still believes in the beliefs of racial superiority, that the white Aryans are superior and that Jews are evil.
Beth Rickey is a state Republican Party official who has investigated Duke and tried to kick him out of her party. 2 years ago, Rickey caught Duke selling Nazi books from his legislative office and alerted the press. Afterwards, she says Duke asked her to lunch to try and convert her.
We talked about race and race mixing and civilizations and how race is the guiding force in all civilizations. One of his favorite topics is the Holocaust and how it never happened.
Rickey says Duke told her that Jews weren't gassed at Auschwitz, that it was a rubber factory. You were talking to a fellow Republican.
Yeah. I'm sitting in a restaurant with all these people. It looks so normal. We're in a, and I'm sitting here having a conversation with a Nazi.
Duke dismisses Rickey as a bigot.
She's a very bigoted person, that's all. She's just very biased, and she has her opinions, and she's very hateful toward me, and I'm opposed to Nazism, any totalitarianism whatsoever.
But there is other evidence that Duke's dramatic denials are a ruse, part of a plan to hide his true views in order to get elected. In an interview taped in 1986, Duke advises Joe Fields, a California-based neo-Nazi, to follow Duke's example and keep his Nazi beliefs under wraps.
If they can call you a Nazi and make it stick, tough, really hard, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the ability of people to open their minds to what you're saying. It's going to hurt your ability to communicate with them. It's unfortunate.
I think maybe I wouldn't go out and say, hey, I'm a Nazi, and this Hitler, National Socialism, but I'd never deny it.
In the interview, Duke comes close to saying he's a Nazi, but explains he never admits it in public for practical reasons.
You have to feel it in your soul.
I weigh a lot of it, see, because I'm a pragmatist.
Some dismiss Duke as a joke. They say, only in Louisiana, that steamy banana republic just off Bourbon Street, where the only deadly sin is boring the voters. But no one down here is laughing at Duke. He's a serious candidate for governor, stirring that spicy gumbo that makes Louisiana politics a sort of test kitchen for the rest of the country. And even if he loses, Duke's hinting at a run for Congress, maybe even president.
Tell me what is there to fear?
Art Harris, CNN Special Assignment.
David Duke lost in his run for governor, but he has now declared himself in the presidential race. Next, controversy surrounding the man now heading the CIA.
So help you God.
I do.
Ford Motor Company. Profiles in quality. Pride.
Special Assignment's Brian Barger was one of the first to examine in detail the controversy surrounding Robert Gates' nomination to head the U.S. intelligence community, Gates' second nomination to direct the CIA. This report dealt with questions surrounding Gates and the Iran-Contra scandal.
The first time Gates was nominated, he maintained under oath that he was largely kept in the dark about White House aide Oliver North's arms shipments to Nicaraguan rebels in the mid-1980s. Shipments that violated a congressional ban on military aid. That operation was partly funded by profits from arms sales to Iran.
Where I was not fully informed was
testifying 4 different times, Gates, then the CIA's deputy director, swore he didn't know much about these events until they became public in November 1986. At no time did Gates disclose what now appears to be the central role he actually played in U.S. military aid to the Contras. A White House official has told CNN that at the same time North was running his illicit resupply missions, Gates was put in charge of a separate but overlapping military aid program for the Contras, in anticipation of Congress lifting its 2-year-old ban on military aid. Overseeing the resumption of legally approved military assistance, Gates headed a senior interagency group, a group that included some of the same officials involved in the illegal arms network. The group included Oliver North and the CIA Central America chief, Alan Fires.
I would just like to say, as you can imagine, this is not a terribly pleasant experience for me.
In federal court, Fires recently pleaded guilty to charges of withholding information from Congress and acknowledged he told 2 CIA superiors details of Iran-Contra operations months before they became public. So as the evidence of the CIA's involvement in Iran-Contra accumulates, the questions facing Gates get tougher. For example, Gates will likely be asked about how he remained ignorant of the illegal operations even while working closely on his interagency group with North and Fires. Testimony and documents released during the 1987 congressional investigation shows the CIA had intimate knowledge of the illicit Contra arms pipeline. For example, several CIA field officers were working directly with North in coordinating airdrops to the rebels in Nicaragua.
A good deal of concern has been expressed about the issue of withholding information.
Senators expect to ask Gates about this White House computer message that indicates then National Security Advisor John Poindexter went to Gates in July 1986 to suggest the CIA take operational control of North's arms network, a network Gates said he knew little about until details became public several months later, in November 1986. In December 1986, in a closed session of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Gates sought to explain his lack of knowledge of North's Contra operations, saying he actively shunned information about how the Contras were funded.
That's highly inappropriate. For Mr. Gates to be the deputy director of the CIA and to talk about shunning information, not wanting to know, that's not the kind of responsibility that we expect of the head of the CIA.
And nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Brian Barger, CNN Special Assignment.
During his confirmation hearings, Gates admitted making some mistakes regarding Iran-Contra, but denied any wrongdoing. The Senate voted to confirm him as head of U.S. intelligence. In a moment, the trial of Manuel Noriega. For the Bush administration, the drug conviction of Manuel Noriega is essential to justify the invasion of Panama. And as I reported earlier this year, U.S. prosecutors are trying to convict Noriega with the testimony of an all-star cast of criminal witnesses that have paraded before a South Florida jury. Miami, Florida seems an appropriate locale for a major drug case, such as that of Manuel Antonio Noriega.
Hey!
A backdrop of color and drama. A city recognized as the drug trafficking capital of North America. A place where lawyers are accustomed to seeing the limits of the U.S. justice system stretched.
Back up, all right? Just back up.
I dubbed it as the Starship Noriega, a case which would go to areas where no lawyers have ever traveled before.
Stay back.
As the defense team entered court,
observers say Noriega is in a position to embarrass U.S.
Long before the trial, the case is marked by conflict and controversy.
We will have a sham proceeding called a trial. This is the first time our government has prosecuted a world leader.
Marked by clashes between defense lawyers and prosecutors.
Government prosecutors were all smiles.
We've always been confident of this aspect of the case.
Accusations fly that pressures on prosecutors to convict Noriega threaten the principles that ensure a fair trial.
When the administration is demanding a conviction, they're giving the green light to the prosecution team to obtain it at virtually any cost.
Defense lawyers and many legal experts claim the cost can be measured in terms of bargains prosecutors have struck with convicted major drug traffickers. But plea bargains have long been an unfortunate part of the drug enforcement process. And in the Noriega case, dozens of drug trafficker witnesses are trading their testimony for hundreds of years in reduced prison sentences. Defense lawyers claim these kinds of witnesses will certainly lie to save their own skin.
Most of them would look you right in the eye and lie, look a jury right in the eye and lie, and look a judge right in the eye and lie at any moment if they knew it would get them somewhere.
In the Noriega prosecution, more deals have been made with convicted drug traffickers than perhaps any case in drug enforcement history. Among the government's rewards, payments totaling more than $1.5 million. Cash to criminal witnesses for providing information and for living expenses. There have also been promises to help criminals get visas to live in the United States. And the most frequent reward, jail sentences slashed. Typical of these deals, the bargain struck by former Noriega military aide and co-defendant, Louis Del Cid. Your client's a sweetheart deal?
We're very happy with the arrangement.
A sweet deal for a former Noriega colleague facing up to 80 years in prison. Now, in return for his testimony, Del Cid expects to serve less than 3 years. Del Cid is one of 9 Noriega co-defendants in U.S. custody. 8 have agreed to testify against Noriega in return for reduced prison terms. Among them, convicted Panamanian cocaine smuggler Ahmed Paredes.
They'd caught him with his pants down, or at least his thumb in the cookie jar, or in real terms, 48 kilos of cocaine in a television set, which he was going to send to the United States.
Ahmed Paredes confessed to that charge. But after his arrest in 1988, he consistently denied Noriega had anything to do with his drug smuggling activities. Then, in February 1991, 2 weeks before his own trial, Paredes caved in to prosecution pressure and implicated Noriega in a scheme to ship cocaine through Panama.
My client did change his testimony rather substantially, fairly late in the game.
Facing a possible 50-year sentence, Paredes agreed to testify against Noriega. His sentence was cut to less than 10 years. And his attorney says Paredes may end up with no time in jail, only probation. Prosecutors also promised to help the young Panamanian drug smuggler establish residence in the United States. Paredes joins a rogues gallery of criminal witnesses lined up to testify against Noriega.
I think that there is probably not a human being alive who would not shade a little fact if it meant getting out of prison 10 years sooner.
So far in the trial, defense attorneys have spent much of their cross-examination attacking the deals made by prosecutors with witnesses who have testified against General Noriega. When we come back, an area teeming with wildlife has become one of the most polluted sites in the world. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal was the site of chemical dumping by the U.S. Army and Shell Oil Company for 40 years. As Special Assignments Brooks Jackson disclosed, it is an environmental catastrophe that will take decades to clean up.
On this patch of high plains in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, wildlife abounds. On the surface, But in the soil and water below is an environmental disaster. You are about to visit 27 square miles of the most badly poisoned land on Earth. For 40 years, this was a death factory. The U.S. Army made poison gas here. Mustard gas, phosgene, nerve agent. And here also the Shell Oil Company produced pesticides, aldrin and dieldrin, so dangerous they are now banned. The factory is shut down now, but there remains a cleanup job so enormous, so expensive, so hazardous, that a century from now it may still be dangerous for human beings to live here, or even near here. Welcome to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. Once fertile farmland, the Arsenal's Section 36 is now a toxic desert, perhaps the single most polluted square mile in the United States. What happened here at the Arsenal is a story of human ignorance, bureaucratic indifference, and corporate greed, a story that is still unfolding. The cleanup will take decades.
We're about in the middle of the process right now, and we'll probably be here for the final cleanup until the year 2005-2010.
But Colorado state health officials measure the damage in centuries.
If the federal government continued along the path that they're going right now, you will not have safe level of contamination in people's drinking water in 100 years from here.
Some of the wildlife in the Arsenal have died of pesticide poisoning. So there is great concern about this endangered species, the bald eagle. More than 40 of them roost and feed here in the winter. This 2-year-old female bald eagle, still too young to have her adult black and white feathers, is being tested for possible pesticide poisoning.
We take blood from them and to check their health and take a series of measurements, attach a radio transmitter to them. Each individual bird's got its own frequency, so we can tell which one it is.
The bald eagles show no sign of poisoning so far. They're bigger than the owls and hawks, and they don't live here full time. Maybe they're just lucky, too. Not only animals are affected. For decades, contamination has flowed downhill from the Arsenal into the well water used by humans. In Henderson today, people are scared.
I've got a 2-year-old baby that's got just eczema already. I have to be afraid for my family and for my children because one of the most frightening things about chemicals is that it usually takes a long time for them to take the effect on a human body.
Henderson residents now drink bottled water. It's supplied by the Colorado Department of Health and the federal EPA. The cost, $100,000 a year. The reason, Henderson well water is contaminated with a colorless, odorless liquid chemical called diisopropyl methylphosphonate, or DIMP. There's no question where DIMP comes from, the Army.
It's the opinion of the Colorado Department of Health that DIMP in the concentrations that exist in people's drinking water does pose a health threat.
I don't want my children to be the guinea pigs so that they can say in 15 years, yes, there is something about DIMP. Benny's children have cancer.
You're losing your pants, Nimbus.
There's no evidence that DIMP causes cancer so far. But scientists say other chemicals that have escaped from the Arsenal probably do cause cancer. Among them, dieldrin, trichloroethylene, and DDT. And a 1989 study by the Colorado Department of Health found a dozen cases of bladder cancer in the Henderson area during a 4-year period. That was more than double the average for Colorado. The Arsenal is a prime suspect. I'm Brooks Jackson, CNN Special Assignment.
When we come back, the U.S. Agency for International Development. It is supposed to help the world's poor. But in Peru, projects in which it was involved ended up killing babies. The Agency for International Development. Its mission, to help the world's poor. Special Assignment's Mark Feldstein found the agency to be plagued with corruption, waste, and fraud. From Central America to Asia to Africa, and in this report, Peru.
In Peru, the AIDS story has been tragic. Here, children were killed by medicine, poison medicine, supplied by AID.
My daughter was 9 months old. When they gave her the medicine, she became purple. All her hands, her nails, she was all purple. Her lips, her everything. Then she died.
It happened at this hospital in Lima one terrible night in 1986. It happened in a ward filled with infants.
They were in their beds, and suddenly one became violently ill. Nausea, vomiting, explosive vomiting, and went into shock. And over the course of the next few hours, 4 children in succession went into this vomiting and convulsive state and then died one by one.
The 4 babies died in a span of just 5.5 hours. Each was less than 15 months old. Doctors soon discovered that the babies had actually been killed by a batch of tainted medicine supplied by AID.
We found that all the packets from one specific box has the same problem.
Both Peruvian medical experts and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control agreed that the AID medicine was to blame. In the words of U.S. prosecutors, the babies' deaths were caused by their consumption of lethal doses of potassium contained in the AID medication.
About 50,000 children die every year because of lack of medication. And they're complaining about 4 people which did not die, first thing, because of my medication.
Mohammed Halim Khan, an AID contractor from the United States, received more than $250,000 to make the Peruvian medicine. He did so at this warehouse in New York, described in court documents as filthy. Khan reportedly used unsupervised children as young as 13 to mix his medicine with a 2x4 stick. Khan denies all of this. He also disputes the medical experts who blame him for the babies' deaths.
They didn't produce any evidence. They just wrote up evidence.
Center for Disease Control.
He wrote a report. He didn't produce any evidence. He wrote it up.
Epidemiological study?
Yes. I can write anything what you want. Give me enough money, I'll write anything for you.
So you think this was just
It's baloney,
lies?
Total lies. Yes, indeed.
Nevertheless, a federal grand jury in New York indicted Khan on 32 counts of involuntary manslaughter and fraud. He ultimately pled guilty to 1 fraud count and was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail. Despite it all, Khan maintains his innocence. How can you say you're innocent when you pled guilty?
I did not plead guilty.
Yes, you did. It's in
My
the
attorney
transcripts.
did.
Who was speaking, you or your attorney?
He was speaking most of the time.
Page 12, it says, you, Mr. Khan, said guilty, not your attorney.
Right, I agree with you.
So you pled guilty.
I did not know what I was even doing at that time. That's what I'm saying. I did say that, yes. No
so
question
you
about
pled
it.
guilty.
Yeah, you can say that way, yes.
Children died. Small, innocent babies died.
Mr. Khan, the families of those babies are still grieving for their loss.
Can I tell you something? Out of the 11 babies there, I believe 2 or 3 were abandoned by their parents.
Tarde, Señor, el descanso eterno, la luz perpetua lo alumbre.
There, they just leave the children in the hospital and they'll forget about them even.
But at a cemetery in Lima, the Pastrana family hasn't forgotten. They still mourn their 7-month-old son, Carlos. As for Mohammed Khan, he's now out of prison, on bail, appealing his conviction. He says that AID recently sent him a leaflet inviting him to apply for other aid contracts. Mark Feldstein, CNN Special Assignment.
When we come back, we will ride with the tribe depicted in the Oscar-winning film Dances with Wolves to rid themselves of a century of despair.
a heinous crime was committed. The events that happened and that led up to 1890 and the subsequent actions against our people was horrendous. The United States gave Congressional Medal of Honors for killing women and children and unarmed men.
Here, warm up your bit. This bit's cold and you're gonna take it.
On the Pine Ridge Reservation in western South Dakota, the Lakota Sioux are saddling up to finish something that began 100 years ago at Wounded Knee. The government called it a battle. The Sioux called it a massacre. Counting the wind chill, the temperature here is 60 degrees below zero. They will ride for 13 days, 250 miles. Alex Whiteplume is one of the leaders.
Okay, we'll go lead my horse to go around the bonfire someplace and just keep warm until we get started.
Okay. The riders will follow the same trail to Wounded Knee that the legendary Sioux chief Bigfoot rode that freezing December of 1890.
Pull it back.
A few children are riding today. Tokala Clifford here, 12 years old.
Well, are you gonna ride?
In cold December snow.
Freezing and so hungry that they ate their own horses, Bigfoot and his followers were intercepted by the 7th Cavalry, the old regiment of General George Armstrong Custer.
Was it revenge for Custer or the ghost dance?
Surrounded by the soldiers, the Indians spent the night at Wounded Knee Creek.
Well, they took all the weapons that we had. Then I heard a shot ring out, and the bullets came down like hailstones from the sky.
The massacre that would live on in history had begun.
I saw my people die.
The soldiers had rapid-fire weapons, Hotchkiss guns. The Indians fled, but it was a slaughter.
To run from the cavalry's gun.
Bigfoot and over 300 of his followers were killed. Black Elk says that some women and children were bunched in heaps because they huddled together, and some were scattered because they ran. 20 U.S. cavalrymen were given the Congressional Medal of Honor for the Battle of Wounded Knee.
This is Chief Bigfoot, you know. And if you look at him, it looks like he's trying to get up. This is something that was totally uncalled for 100 years ago.
After everybody was killed, it just, all of a sudden, a big, giant storm just came out of nowhere, and it just started snowing. So the cavalry left all those people just laying there for about a week. And they came back about a week and just grabbed them and dug a big, giant grave, and they just threw them all in there.
This is how the mass grave looked back then. They called it Death Gulch.
They buried live bodies also, people that were froze. But there was a man with a mustache jumping up and down on the bodies, breaking them down so they could squeeze more in there.
Black Elk said that a people's dream died in the bloody mud of Wounded Knee.
I'm a descendant of white lads who was wounded and who had to crawl for about 3 miles after the battle. But he survived. He was one of the few who survived.
So they ride today, these Lakota Sioux, because they believe the spirits of all those Wounded Knee dead still wander this trail.
So we rode with the spirits. You could feel them. You could see little sparks all over the place. You could feel the presence of the spirits.
They rode to the gravesite at Wounded Knee. It was a religious ride, a ride, they said, to mend a sacred hoop. In the Lakota belief, when a person dies, the soul remains on Earth until a special ceremony is held to send it to the universe. None of those slaughtered at Wounded Knee and buried here ever had such a ceremony. Their souls remained earthbound, and a sacred hoop was broken. The Indians here believe that many of their trials and troubles over the last 100 years are a result of that broken spiritual hoop. Ken Bodie, CNN Special Assignment.
This has been a look at some of the 1991 Special Assignment projects. I'm John Kemp, and for all the Special Assignment staff, thanks for watching.
Special. The run for the White House.
I can't wait now to roll up my sleeves and become a candidate.
I believe we need a new kind of leadership. Leadership not mired in the politics of the past.
I believe there's a hunger in America, a hunger for a new vision.
I want to lead a process of renewal in America.
The challengers versus the incumbent. Is America ready for a change, or will it stay the course? Laying the groundwork for Campaign USA 92, the year in review.
This is the year in politics. I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. During the next hour, we'll be looking back and looking ahead, looking at President Bush's political fortunes, at the late blooming crop of Democratic presidential candidates, and at issues on voters' minds. We'll have reports from our correspondents covering the candidates and analysis from our group of CNN political pundits. In all, maybe enough hot air to knock a few cents off our winter heating bills. But before we begin, let's check the hour's headlines. Here's Susan Rook at CNN Center in Atlanta.
Thanks, Bernie. Today, Mario Cuomo springs a surprise. After 2 months of considering a run for the Democratic presidential nomination, it came down to the wire, and Cuomo said no. The New York governor says he needs to concentrate on solving his state's severe budget problems. More on Cuomo just ahead in our political year in review. The central bank makes a bold move to pump up...
In politics in just a moment with the up and down year of President George Bush.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. Yes, these are tough times. And yes, there are layoffs. And many families are having a rough go of it. And the American people want action.
He's the man who proclaimed, read my lips, no new taxes. He talked about the 1,000 points of light. He banished broccoli from the White House and put together the coalition that won the Gulf War. Now, can George Bush put together a winning combination for the 1992 campaign? Our senior White House correspondent, Charles Bierbauer, joins us to review the president's up and down year. Charles?
Bernie, George Bush may have thought he'd had his last truck stop breakfast. This campaign should have been a presidential limo ride. But the president has found that for just one more time, he's going to have to roll up his sleeves, head up to New Hampshire, and work hard to pump votes out of a wary electorate.
With you. Good to see you.
George, first British man to shake your hand.
Well, all right, all right.
You.
Glad to see you. Good luck, good luck.
In the early going, George Bush was the president who brought some opponents to their knees and watched old adversaries fade away. He was either good or lucky or both. And at a snapshot's glance, a sure winner again in 1992.
I can't wait now to roll up my sleeves and become a candidate. Now...
However, some Republicans felt the president had already waited too long to focus on the issues that would be crucial in '92.
the president himself must be personally perceived as being on top of the economic situation. He simply has to do the things and position his administration in such a way early next year that that will happen and that message is conveyed to the people.
Clearly, while the president was winning praise overseas, he was losing ground at home.
Oh, he's in some trouble. I mean, I think if you had a really bad 1992 and that he could lose.
It is the continuing economic recession that imperils the Bush re-election. On recent forays outside Washington, the president has made a show of breaking bread with the working man and woman.
You got good barbecue?
Yes, we do, certainly.
But sometimes it just looks like a campaign gimmick.
I think we can expect to see continuing photo opportunities, minimalist approach in policy changes. I don't think it will work. I think the American people recognize where the buck stops, and it stops in the White House.
This is probably the most elitist administration in the 20th century. And the president's background is becoming an issue. People think personally he doesn't understand, he doesn't comprehend how middle-class people have to struggle to get along these days.
The president's standard answer to the nation's economic woes has been to point a finger at Congress.
We got too darn many liberal Democrats controlling every house of the United States Congress, every committee, every subcommittee, and they can't think of one new idea. They can all they can try to do is block my domestic agenda.
It's Democrat bashing, but the president may have a point.
Right now, people think the Democrats can do better on some things. They think they can do better in dealing with poverty and homelessness. They can do a better job on unemployment. But they are not sure that the Democrats can do a better job managing the nation's economy.
Bush, however, has more than just Democrats to worry about.
To take my party back and to take our country back, I am today declaring my candidacy for the Republican nomination for President of the United States.
We have liked the rhetoric of George Bush. We have not liked the performance of George Bush.
Bush is not the first president seeking re-election to face a challenge from within his party. The president hustled First Lady Barbara Bush up to New Hampshire to file for the first primary in February, and he's likely to survive that challenge.
I do not see Pat Buchanan as being a viable candidate beyond New Hampshire. I don't see David Duke as being a viable candidate anywhere. So it seems to me in a relatively short period of time, the president ought to be able to move the opposition out of the way on the Republican side.
Others see a real frustration in these candidacies.
If you take the idea of cutting defense spending, of thinking that there was a mistake in the Persian Gulf, of wanting to be tougher on trade policy, of having a sense that we have to pay attention more to our own problems and worrying about international finance and a number of George Bush's concerns, well, on those issues, Pat Buchanan is actually closer to what the Democrats are saying, so that if he gets people concerned about those issues and restive on those issues, they could easily walk out of the Republican coalition.
Duke's real threat is as a third-party candidate who could attract 5 or 6% of the vote in November.
He is a big threat because he'd probably take anywhere from 65 to 80% of those votes from George Bush. That could give the Democrats a chance in some deep southern states.
The president, now alert to the fact that the 1992 race has started, says none of these factors should deter him.
And you said if the economy is bad, can I get re-elected? And the answer is yes, because I'm a good president.
The most recent polls show the public is divided on that. The president's overall approval rating has dipped into the high 40s. Moreover, only 1 in 4 Americans think George Bush is doing a good job on the economy. By November, the Persian Gulf War and the collapse of communism will be on the pages of the history books. But the U.S. economy will still be in the headlines. Bernie?
Charles, where is Dan Quayle in this political quotient?
Well, in that piece, he's there subliminally, I suppose. You might note that all the signs say Bush-Quayle 1992. The president is full of praise for his vice president, and the vice president is almost fawning in his praise of George Bush. But Dan Quayle serves a couple of important functions to this administration and to the campaign. One, he's a terrific fundraiser. He gets out on the stump and does a lot for Republican candidates and for the party. And two, he remains the conservative voice race within this administration and the conservatives' link to it. And with Bush under attack from the right, from the Pat Buchanans of his party, that's very important that he have someone whom the conservatives seem to like within the administration.
Charles, is George Bush singing Goodbye, Mario?
Well, the president today said he was caught off guard, too, by Governor Cuomo's decision not to run. He said as late as yesterday he thought Governor Cuomo would jump into the race. But the president said it wouldn't have been a free ride for Mr. Cuomo up in New Hampshire. With Cuomo out, one key Republican I've talked with says it really seems the Democratic race now boils down to a battle between Governor Clinton and Senator Kerry. Bernie?
Thank you, Charles. Will voodoo economics finally catch up with George Bush? Well, in a minute, our CNN political analysts will ponder the political spells Mr. Bush and his advisors need to cast in 1992. We have assembled a red, white, and blue ribbon panel of political commentators to help us look at the political year ahead for George Bush and the Republicans. Joining us now, our cadre of CNN political analysts, including William Snyder, whom you saw before, Ken Bodie, who's a correspondent with CNN's Special Assignment Unit, syndicated columnist Jack German of the Baltimore Evening Sun, and David Broder, also a political columnist and correspondent for the Washington Post. Gentlemen, the ice is cracking beneath George Bush. Will he fall in?
You know, every single indicator of whether this president should be reelected is negative right now. Given the numbers on the economy, the poll numbers, everything that we see right now, he should not be reelected next year.
I don't know who unleashed Clayton Yiter, who says that there's no viable candidate, that Duke is not viable, Buchanan is not viable. I don't think the voters in New Hampshire are going to see it that way. I think Pat Buchanan is very viable, at least in the starting primary in New Hampshire. And if Mr. Yiter doesn't reassess the estimate, he's making a big mistake.
They've got to worry about a couple of things, Bernie. They've got to worry first. I mean, they worry about the economy more than anything else. This is overarching. But they're also worried, and some of them are, about how President Bush behaves under political stress. And so far, it has not been very encouraging to them because he keeps changing his mind. He throws a ball up in the air and he grabs that one, tries something else. And that worries some of the Republicans who think that maybe he needs to project more of an image of firmness and cohesion than he's done.
He's in all the trouble that my colleagues have said here, but one thing he has done, he has turned the corner in terms of having a coherent campaign strategy and team at this point. With Sam Skinner and Bob Teeter there, you have people who understand how you deliver a message in an election year.
But neither one of them has experience in a national campaign, do they?
Teeter?
Oh, Teeter has an executive experience in a campaign.
Oh, but Teeter's been about
running and managing.
Bill, when they met the first time, there were, I think, 8 people in this group, 27 national presidential campaigns among the 8 of them.
They do have bench strength in that score, that's for sure.
What about this effort to put the president out among the people, eating a sandwich on wax paper in Chicago at the Billy Goat restaurant there?
Going to Billy Goat, so he's a real fit there, isn't he? That's Michael Royko's bar. Let's be serious here. You can get away with those stunts when there's not serious things on the voters' minds. When there are serious things like their jobs and their survival and their health care and so forth, like right now, stunts are just stunts.
George Bush is not a populist. There's not a populist bone in his body. The worst thing a politician can do is try to pretend he's something that he's not. Remember when Jimmy Carter said he lusted in his heart after women? He was trying to pretend he was one of the boys when he clearly wasn't. When George Bush eats pork rinds and goes to bars and listens to country music, he's trying to pretend he's a populist. It's very phony.
Is Bush going to undergo a mugging by the far right of his party?
He's going to undergo a serious contest from Pat Buchanan in New Hampshire, and they're making another mistake, and that is trying to keep David Duke off primary ballots, pressuring secretaries of state, urging them to keep Duke off the ballot. Now, the thing that will hurt George Bush the most is if David Duke says, okay, if I can't run as a Republican, I'll run as a general election independent. That's what will really hurt him.
But David Duke's going to do that anyhow.
Well, maybe he is, but he's certainly going to do it if he feels, if he can argue that the Republicans have forced him out of this race and made him do it. It's going to be easier for him to do it.
I have a different view about the Buchanan challenge. I think it's very healthy for George Bush to have people to the right of him, and particularly somebody who is arguing, quote unquote, America first. I don't think that's where the country is. I don't think that's where the Republican Party is. And by taking on Pat Buchanan, even with a proxy through Dan Quayle, I think he strengthens himself for the general election.
You think Quayle will be the proxy in New Hampshire to go up and campaign against Buchanan?
He's already begun.
I can't see a battle of wits. A matched wits between Pat Buchanan and Dan Quayle doesn't seem to me to be a very even fight. The fact is, Bush will look stronger if he completely demolishes Pat Buchanan and David Duke, as he did to Pat Robertson in '88. But if Duke gets some delegates and shows up at the convention, if Pat Robertson does well in New Hampshire, it's going to weaken Bush, I think.
Well, when we return, the rest of the Democrats and the rest of the year in politics. A field of 6 major presidential candidates, all seemingly anxious to take on George Bush next November. But one notable name is missing from the pack. Our CNN national political correspondent Gene Randall joins us now from cold Albany, New York, where some of the biggest news of the campaign season may have taken place just today. Gene?
Bernie, the news, of course, that New York Governor Mario Cuomo will not be a presidential candidate in 1992. He made the announcement in the state capitol building just behind me earlier today. And maybe it says something about this political year for the Democrats, that one of its most closely watched events turned out to be a non-starter. Most blame it on the Persian Gulf War, an early reluctance among Democrats to challenge the commander-in-chief. By the time the 4 days of ground fighting ended in February, President Bush's standing in the public opinion polls was stratospheric, and the Democratic Party was being assailed by Republicans for largely opposing the use of force against Iraq. In short, George Bush appeared unbeatable. Many Democrats in private admitted as much. Party Chairman Ron Brown says the pessimism was never warranted.
I feel almost prophetic in being someone who was standing up months ago in times when George Bush was at 90% in the favorable ratings in polls, knowing that that just couldn't last.
Former U.S. Senator Paul Tsongas of Massachusetts announced for president at the end of April. A long-shot candidate in a long-shot campaign, Tsongas focused on the ailing economy.
I commit myself to economic security for this generation and their children.
We want jobs now! But despite increasing signs the economy would overwhelm the war as a campaign issue, for the next 4.5 months, Paul Tsongas was the only Democrat in the race. Notable among those who decided against a White House run, Senator Al Gore of Tennessee, House Democratic leader Richard Gephardt of Missouri, and Jesse Jackson, all losers to Michael Dukakis for the '88 nomination. Senator Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia, on the verge of announcing, also opted out. Then, of course, there was Mario Cuomo and his New York-based waiting game. Anything but funny to a Democratic field made up largely of unknowns, Cuomo's public agonizing became the stuff of stand-up comedy.
And Mario Cuomo, and no one knows what he's going to do. I don't know if you've seen his new public service commercial for New York City. It says, a mind is a terrible thing to make up. Yeah.
Those who followed Paul Tsongas in the race, Virginia Governor Douglas Wilder, Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, and Senator Bob Kerrey of Nebraska in September, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton and former California Governor Jerry Brown in October. In the perceived top tier, Harkin, the liberal and the most strident.
That George Herbert Walker Bush has got feet of clay, and I'm going to take a hammer to him.
Clinton, the moderate, calling for a break with his party's liberal past.
Together we can provide the leadership that will restore the American dream, fight for the forgotten middle class, that will provide more opportunity, demand more responsibility from each of us, and create a stronger community in this great country of ours.
Both Clinton and Kerry using a generational approach.
I want to lead America's fearless, restless voyage of generational progress.
Joining Tsongas as long shots, Douglas Wilder, who preached fiscal austerity and reform of what he called a polarized two-party system.
The party inside Washington, which makes the deals, and the rest of us, the party outside, that has to pay for the deals.
And Jerry Brown, whose message was pure protest, as he rallied against what he called the corruption of big money.
Our democracy has been the object of a hostile takeover, engineered by a confederacy of corruption, careerism, and campaign consultants. And money has been the lubricant greasing the deal.
Then, in November, a little-known interim U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, Harris Wofford, provided the Democratic Party with a boost, one its leaders hoped had national significance. Wofford defeated President Bush's hand-picked candidate, former Attorney General Dick Thornburgh. He did it by attacking the administration for the recession and calling for national health insurance.
You got good barbecue?
Even Republicans warned Pennsylvania was a message to President Bush that the economy was a ticking time bomb set to go off in America's grassroots.
15 minutes to air. 15 minutes to air.
And after the first televised Democratic debate last Sunday night in Washington, Party Chairman Ron Brown felt he had reason to smile.
I thought it was a home run for the Democratic Party.
Still, as they head for February's crucial primary showdown in New Hampshire, all the Democrats in the field need to be aware that winning the nomination is one thing, victory next November is quite something else.
Well, we've shown an amazing capacity as Democrats for fratricidal warfare and for shooting ourselves in the foot. What we've got to avoid this time is not getting derailed on secondary issues.
Mario Cuomo's decision to stay out of the presidential race deprives the Democratic Party of a big-name candidate, and that will be a handicap against an incumbent president. Still, there seems to be a genuine conviction in the Democratic Party that the country's fragile, battered economy and George Bush's problems in dealing with it will even the playing field. Bernie?
Gene, those Democratic six, are they giddy tonight? Are they sweating less? Are they happy? What's your assessment?
Well, Bernie, certainly an obstacle is out of the way on the path to the nomination. I'll tell you two reactions because they represent a certain polarity. Former Senator Paul Tsongas of Massachusetts, who urged Cuomo to run, said it would be a disappointment to the party and to the country. Former California Governor Jerry Brown said he just couldn't believe that at some point, somehow, Cuomo would not reemerge as part of the presidential picture.
Gene Randall, thank you. Well, our political analysts are standing by, and we're going to turn them loose on those Democrats when we return. Question. Will the White House have a Democrat in '92? Let's put the question to our political analysts. Jack Germont? Will it?
Well, what's the first rule of politics? Never say never. It's possible. I don't know. I think the Democrats, it depends, if the economy stays as bad as it is now, and the Democrats can get through without tearing themselves in small pieces, which seems more possible than it has been in the past, largely because Jesse Jackson's not part of the equation. That being the case, I think they have a reasonable chance. I would certainly think if I had to bet, the chalk is Bush, but it's not a lock.
You know, Gene Randall made an interesting point. He said that the Democrats don't have a big-name figure running in their field. That could be an advantage, a blessing in disguise, because this may be a kind of year in which people want a new face, a fresh face. Remember, this was how Jimmy Carter got elected in 1976, the only Democrat to be elected in 25 years. He was a fresh face, new, untested. People were looking for something different. Not being a well-known candidate with a long record like Mario Cuomo could be an advantage.
Right now, there are several of these people that Gene Randall pointed out, Al Gore, Dick Gebhardt, Jay Rockefeller, and probably Jesse Jackson as well, who, when they dropped out, George Bush was sitting at about 85% in the polls, and Mario Cuomo was still a factor. I bet those guys are at home right now wondering about that mistake.
I think the Democrats are a threat, and I think the fact that Cuomo will not be the nominee improves their chances of having somebody who will be competitive with George Bush in November. Having a candidate out of the South or the Midwest will give them an advantage that they wouldn't have had if Cuomo were their nominee. But the one disadvantage that they face is that this really is a field of strangers to the American people, and there's not a great eagerness on the part of the American people to entrust the presidency to someone that they don't know very well.
Brings me to the question, the juice of politics. What about money? Are these guys really going to be able to raise the money?
Well, first of all, they don't need to raise as much as they raised last time, Bernie, because the time they have to spend it is a lot shorter. Some of them are doing pretty well. Clinton's been raising about $700,000 a week in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I would suspect Cuomo getting out will unleash a lot of money, from liberals, so that perhaps Harkin will better carry some of the others.
Money will be a factor, Jack, in this sense. If you're not in the top 3 coming out of New Hampshire, it's going to be awful tough to raise money for the next round of primaries. That puts an awful lot of premium on who gets into the top half in New
Exactly.
Hampshire.
Even after New Hampshire, it's tough to get the money raised, get it matched, get it spent in time for things like Super Tuesday.
But you have to get up in the top 2 or 3 because the press cannot cover more than 2 candidates, 3 outside, at the outside, and chew gum at the same time. So you've got to come out of there anyway.
And if they don't have money, they depend on the press for free coverage.
Okay, handicap.
Well, I'm going to
ticket.
No, let's ask, who does Cuomo getting out? Who does he help?
Okay.
And I'm going to say right now he helps Paul Tsongas a lot in the state of New Hampshire, at least in New Hampshire. What Tsongas might do afterwards, I don't know. But Tsongas is going to do better than a lot of people think in New Hampshire.
I think Harkin is going to be helped, too, because, you know, a lot of people are looking to Mario Cuomo to carry a message that there's pain, there's suffering out there. A lot of poor people looked at him to say, to carry the Democratic Party message, the old message, we told you so. We told you that the economy would be ruined by Reagan and Bush. Harkin has a version of that same kind of message. I think he gets a boost out of this. I expect to see a contest between Harkin essentially speaking to the pain and suffering of Democrats who want revenge for 10 years of Reagan and Bush economic policies. And a lot of moderates are going to come in also because they don't like George Bush. They are looking for an alternative, and it's going to work the other way, too. They're looking for some other kind of Democrat, and that could be Clinton or Kerry.
And Clinton is helped by this, not just in the South, but in Illinois, in some of the other Midwestern states where they are looking for an alternative.
Well, to prove that we can teach this round or flat, let me say that I think Kerry gets help, and I'll tell you why. If Cuomo had come in, it was easy to see a polarization between Cuomo and Clinton, as all the moderates lined up behind Clinton. In that case, Kerry could never have got a hearing. Now he has a chance.
Yes. My turn? There's one more thing to say about this, I think, in terms of Clinton, and that is he has an interesting possibility with Jesse Jackson out of this race and Mario Cuomo out of this race of assembling both a white-black coalition in the South for the first time since Jimmy Carter did it in 1976. And that could make him a fairly strong candidate, especially with that network of public officials that have known Bill Clinton as governor of Arkansas for the past 12 or 13 years down there. So he's going to be formidable, that's for sure.
Well, we've heard from the politicians. Next, what's on the minds of the voters?
I'd say the economy is like #1. It's just always everything.
I think the most important thing is the environment.
The healthcare situation in the United States is deplorable.
I think the most important issue is education because I think that's where it all starts.
I think abortion actually would be the most important issue.
The most important political issue this season, this year, is unemployment. It's growing. It's people need jobs.
Healthcare, crime, abortion, and term limits. But you probably can guess the voters' #1 concern heading into '92.
The economy is doing very poorly, and we really need to find some way to boost it.
The most immediate issue that would come to mind is the economy, not only for myself, but for the nation as a whole.
With so many people losing their jobs, I think that's the utmost in people's minds.
Well, as an independent businessman, I guess probably the state of the economy.
Right now, a lot of people are losing their jobs. I think that's something that needs to be taken care of.
Bill Schneider joins us again. Going into campaign '92, what's the most important issue apparently in the minds of the American electorate?
Well, we've been asking that for some time in the Gallup CNN poll, and you can see it there. It's the economy. Economy is the #1 issue, close behind unemployment, poverty, and homelessness. Those figures have doubled since September. Twice as many people are worried about the economy, unemployment, than were worried about those issues in September. That's the overwhelming issue, the economy, the economy, the economy.
The public's assessment of George Bush.
Well, you know, Bush overall has a 50% approval rating. Now, look at these figures. You see 22% approve of George Bush's handling of the economy. That's a terrible rating. It's over 3-to-1 negative. When they're asked about handling foreign policy, it's over 2-to-1 positive. 64% approve his handling of foreign policy. So his overall approval rating is sort of in the middle, but it's considerably higher than his approval rating for handling the economy. That's clearly the weak point. I've never seen a discrepancy this big for any president between his economic ratings and his foreign policy ratings.
Over the past few years, there's been talk of anti-incumbency sentiment. Is it strong? How strong?
Well, it's interesting. It's strong in a general sort of way, but you see from this chart, 56% still say George Bush deserves to be reelected, and an even higher figure, 58%, believe that their member of Congress, their U.S. representative, deserves to be reelected. But look at the governors. The governors are in trouble. 47%, a plurality, say their governor does not deserve to be reelected. Remember, the governors presided over a very large tax increase in this country this year. And look at this. When asked about most U.S. representatives and most U.S. senators, about half say they do not deserve to be reelected. There's a sense that people want to fire Congress, but they don't want to fire their congressman.
Well, with the economic problems, Campaign 92, how does the Gulf War figure?
Well, we looked at the trend lines on Bush's approval rating and on the way people think things are going in the country. And what you can see is that Bush's approval rating, which is the red line, and how well people think things are going in the country were closely linked until the Gulf crisis. That's marked by those 2 stars on the chart. And then what's happened since then is Bush was given a kind of cushion. There's about a 20-point differential between those who approve the way he's doing his job and the way people think things are going in the country. That means his job approval rating has been about 20 points higher than the assessment of the country. Now look at what's happened in 1991. It's absolutely phenomenal. He reached the pinnacle of success with the Gulf War. Then he started a straightforward decline. And what's happened is the cushion is not enough to protect him. As people think things are going worse and worse in the country, those 20 points have not protected him. He's now fallen below 50% in the polls, and below 50%, that means he's in trouble.
Well, 9 months ago, he could have folded his hands over his stomach. It looked like a cakewalk. Where do you think he stands tonight?
Well, you know, back in March, at the end of the Gulf War, you can see that he was 50 points ahead in the polls. That shrunk to about 20 points very quickly in April. And his lead over a generic Democrat has been shrinking ever since. In the latest Gallup CNN poll, it's only 12 points, 45 to 33. When an incumbent has an approval rating, rather a re-election rate of just 45%, less than half think he deserves to be re-elected, then that means the incumbent is in trouble. Now, this, remember, is a test between George Bush and a generic Democrat. It's just Bush versus the Democrat. What it suggests is if George Bush had to run unopposed, he'd probably lose. I think what the Republicans are counting on is the Democrats are going to have to nominate a candidate, and they hope once again they're going to nominate a loser.
Thank you, Bill. We aren't done yet. Stay with us for the sometimes nasty, occasionally entertaining, and increasingly important harbingers of an election year, those political commercials.
Out of the heartland of America, out of this small frame house in Abilene, Kansas, came a man like D. Eisenhower.
Vintage, vintage, vintage. Oh, politics supplies us with a never-ending list of relative unknowns who become household names. People like Jimmy Carter, Dan Quayle, and Willie Horton. As we head into 92, political advertising looms larger than ever in the political picture. Ken Bodie joins us to discuss the lessons of 1988 and to look ahead to 92.
Bernie, a great deal of the public money goes to political advertising in the course of these years, course of the campaign years. More of it in the general than in the primaries, but it goes in the primaries too. And the early ads, the ones that begin to run in New Hampshire and Iowa, when Iowa's important, tend to be of a certain characteristic. They tend to be more positive. They tend to be ads where the candidates introduce themselves, and they're only seen in a few primary states. So most Americans don't even see those ads. Later in the primaries, and it'll happen again, when somebody begins to win, the gloves will come off and the ads will get to be negative, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Mondale did it to Gary Hart when he began to win in 1984. George Bush did it to Bob Dole in 1988. In the general election, it's an air war of television commercials. And not all of these ads are accurate. Many of them are purposely misleading. And journalists after 1988 decided that we ought to try to do something about really informing the public a little bit better about those ads. And David Broder, our colleague on this program, has been one of the advocates, the leading advocates of our doing that. Opponents often count on us in the press to inform the public of inaccuracies and misleading claims in these ads. We're beginning to figure out how to do it. Let's take a look for a second for tonight at an important ad from 1988.
As Governor Michael Dukakis vetoed mandatory sentences for drug dealers, he vetoed the death penalty. His revolving door prison policy gave weekend furloughs to first-degree murderers not eligible for parole. While out, Many committed other crimes like kidnapping and rape.
Okay, let's stop it for a second here. Let's freeze it and let's rewind it.
The revolving door prison policy gave weekend furloughs to first-degree murderers.
Now, the visual effect you see here is that these prisoners are walking right out of the jail and into your living room. You're encouraged to think that all 268 of these prisoners were first-degree murderers. The fact is that's not true. Only 4 were. And you come away believing that all 268 ultimately escaped. And the truth of the matter is, of course, that only a tiny percentage of those actually did. What we're going to be doing this year on CNN, and I hope other networks as well, is we're going to be freezing those ads when we find those inaccuracies, stepping in front of them and trying to inform the public a little bit better of when there are these kinds of visual misrepresentations or inferences that we're led to make that just simply aren't true.
Well, that gets a big amen from me. But if the politicians know that we in the news media are going to treat attack ads like a piece of red meat, might this encourage them to clean up their acts?
Hopefully, hopefully. Certainly, the ads that have begun to run now in the primary states seem to be positive ads, and I think everybody understands that all of the journalistic profession is prepared to be a lot more aggressive about ads this time. Mm-hmm. And we have an ad also, by the way, that we ought to take a look at, because one ad is now running in New Hampshire, for New Hampshire, in the Boston stations. It's an ad by Paul Tsongas, the former Massachusetts senator. We got a little bit of that ad to see tonight. Let's take a look at that, if we could.
Okay.
They said he couldn't win, this kid from an old mill town. But he beat the corrupt county politicians and won long-shot elections to Congress and the U.S. Senate. Guts and determination helped Paul Tsongas beat the odds and go on to beat cancer.
Now, you listen to that ad, but you also see something in the ad. What in your opinion, is the message of that ad, Bernie?
Fighter.
Also strength. Look at that butterfly that he's doing down there. It's not very long that you see him do a butterfly. Paul Tsongas is the first cancer survivor ever to run for president. They want to give the visual impression, the message, that Tsongas is over it, he's strong, he has no illness in him anymore, and if he can do the butterfly, which most Americans can't do, then he ought to be strong enough to weather the endurance of a campaign trail.
Well, we've introduced the candidates and lined up the issues. Next, we turn our attention to the battleground. Stay with us as we probe the strategies and look at the political calendar of Campaign USA 92. Politics will miss them. Well, ready or not, it's coming soon. The first test is less than 2 months away. But unlike previous years, those Iowa caucuses have a diminished importance this time around. Jack Germán and David Broder, what will Iowa tell us?
Well, Iowa this year will tell us nothing. It's really changed things radically, Bernie, in this sense. Since 1976, at least, Iowa has been the place you establish the pecking order. Candidates generally have had to been credible coming out of Iowa to succeed in New Hampshire. Now we're back to the pre-1976 situation where New Hampshire established the pecking order. Very different game.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, you know, are finally available, and in one of them it says, New Hampshire will pick the president. And this year, New Hampshire will again pick the president.
Looking down the road, what do you see
necessarily
after Iowa? Say Super Tuesday.
I think another thing you have different this time, Super Tuesday is March 10th. Before that, on March 3rd, you have several primaries, 5 or 6 primaries or caucuses. There's a chance that Georgia will move up to that date, a good chance. If that happens, Georgia would be the only one of the first 11 or 12 states, which is Southern. And that means it would be an opportunity for Clinton to recover if he didn't win New Hampshire and to show his strength.
But Super Tuesday is big, particularly because it includes the 2 super growth states, Florida and Texas. And I was talking to a Republican today who said, I'll tell you 2 things. One, Doug Wilder will be one of the 2 winners in Super Tuesday, and the other will be whoever wins New Hampshire, even if that person is a liberal.
Why Wilder at that stage in the campaign?
Because the black vote is very important in many of those southern states.
I don't think, though, this time that Doug Wilder has a kind of a connection to the black vote that Jesse Jackson had in 1984 or 1988. I think these white candidates are going to compete for the black vote. In fact, I know they are. And they'll get some of it.
Turn your microscope on our state, our home state, Dave Broder, Illinois.
Illinois and Michigan are paired up now on St. Patrick's Day, and that could be a really make-or-break day in this whole process. Two key states, both in the general election and in primaries. If any candidate who can win both of those is probably about 80% of the way toward winning the nomination.
At that point, we'd all be exhausted, but what about California?
Well, I think probably California is one we all like to keep going just because we like to cover it. I think Pennsylvania is more likely to be decisive. If you recall, the last time we had a situation anything like this was Carter in '76, and that was really Pennsylvania was decisive that year.
Do you expect the White House, coming out of New Hampshire, where Pat Buchanan will be challenging strongly George Bush, do you expect the White House to do its damnedest to see that they put the worst possible spin on Buchanan's showing to diminish him going into Super Tuesday?
They'll exaggerate his potential going in, and whatever he gets, they'll say that was less than he should have gotten. But they're worried about it. I mean, earlier Jack was saying, and I was diminishing the threat of Pat Buchanan. Psychologically, they're worried because the economy is not going to look good in the middle of February. They know that. And if the president takes a whack from Pat Buchanan in New Hampshire, it's going to be a sign of real trouble.
David, I'm sorry.
No, I want to say, Bernie, I don't know whether Pat has to win a perception victory in New Hampshire to go on. If he wins whatever the figure is, a certain percentage of the vote that people say, that's better than we thought. If he exceeds expectations, he can go on. If he doesn't, what he does in Super Tuesday becomes irrelevant.
Quickie question with the seconds remaining. Can David Duke set a trap in the South?
Not in the primaries, I don't think. His real threat is in the general election.
He can get enough in the South. What he wants, a few delegates to go and make a unholy fuss at the convention.
This has been fun tonight. That's all our time for now, but our CNN political watchers won't be resting. Already we're in the process of planning Inside Politics 92. Monday through Friday, Inside Politics 92 will give you a look at the candidates in front of the cameras as well as the people behind the scenes. We'll keep up with the events and issues as this campaign unfolds. Inside Politics 92 premieres on January 27th at 4:30 Eastern, and an update again 12:30 a.m. Eastern. We hope you will join us. For all of us at CNN, I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington.
Coming up, Sports Tonight, followed by...
The Republic of Georgia agreed to join the Commonwealth. The Slavic republics of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. The Central Asian republics of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzia, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan. And the southern republics of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Moldavia. All will now be independent countries seeking representation in the United Nations. Current borders will be honored. It was also agreed that Yeltsin's Russia, the largest republic, would take over the Soviet Union's seat in the UN Security Council. Yeltsin declared again there was no room for a central government in the new alliance.
This Commonwealth is not a state. Therefore, it can have no Commonwealth citizenship.
It will have a united armed forces under one central command, but not yet. Soviet Defense Minister Yevgeny Shapashnikov has been named temporary commander-in-chief of the Commonwealth's conventional and nuclear forces. But other leaders, like Kazakhstan's Nursultan Nazarbayev and Ukraine's Leonid Kravchuk, have demanded joint control over nuclear weapons on their soil. Defense problems remain. But what is clear is that Mikhail Gorbachev is out of a job. His resignation, when it does come, will be a mere formality. And it'll mark the end of an era when Gorbachev's glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, became household words. The West fell in love with Gorbachev's smile, his wit, and his willingness to tackle the monolith of Soviet communism. But at home, he was often reviled. A devout communist, his reforms were cosmetic. He couldn't replace a system in decay. Perestroika at home meant empty shelves and empty lives. The people blamed Gorbachev.
Mr. Gorbachev ruined our country, I think so. And all these problems now, it's his fault.
Yeltsin's Commonwealth will now inherit all of the problems that plagued Gorbachev's Soviet Union. And if Yeltsin doesn't produce answers soon, many believe he will inherit Gorbachev's unpopularity as well. Jim Masada, NBC News, Moscow.
And of course, the economy is the most serious of the many issues there after today's events. Soaring inflation is wiping out personal savings. The outlook is grim. Today, I asked Sergei Aksionov, an advisor to the Russian government, about that.
The economic reform that is going to be in power from the 1st of January was just worked out in order to stop this hyperinflation and to decrease the budget deficit. And I think that's the only solution for us to introduce the market economy in this country. We're already late with this economic reform. It should be done maybe 2 years ago.
Mikhail Gorbachev, who has really lost power now, he became very unpopular there in your country because of the economic situation. How much time does Boris Yeltsin, do you have to make that economy start to produce results?
It's a good question. I think that we don't have much time. You know, time is up for us to start acting because what we were doing during this time, we were destroying the old structures, we were destroying the economy, and it's high time for us to start building economy up. That's what we are doing, and that's what we are going to do.
Two questions which were not answered today are military ones. A, who will control the military? Who will, in your opinion?
Well, I think that we are going to work out a kind of formula for joint control of the military forces in future. The possible structure is being discussed nowadays. And during these days, which are left up to the end of month, I think that the president of Russia, Yeltsin, is going to control all these things.
But will Russia have all the nuclear weapons under its control?
Yeltsin is the only one who can press the button, so to say. But in order to press the button, he has to get the agreement for this from leaders of all the states which built this Commonwealth.
Thank you very much, Sergei Aksionov, for being with us today from Moscow.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Bush administration sent congratulations today to the members of the new Commonwealth. Secretary of State James Baker returned home to Washington tonight after visiting 5 of the republics and the NATO ministers meeting in Brussels. The State Department says no decision on diplomatic recognition will be made until after Baker meets with President Bush. And then there are those who try to defy history. An example here is Fidel Castro. The former Soviet Union has cut its oil shipments to Cuba dramatically, and so today drastic limits on energy use went into effect in Cuba. Public transportation will be reduced, taxis eliminated, television programs curtailed to 5 hours most days, night baseball halted completely, and air conditioning turned off. Up to 500,000 people may lose their jobs. Castro called on the Cuban people for understanding to, quote, save the country, the revolution, and socialism. As we cover other events in our world this day, we'll look next to this country and how the flat economy is affecting people's lives here at home. And we'll also see kids with guns. It's no longer only a problem of the inner cities. Guns are now coming to suburbia.
His word, I cannot imagine anything that I said or did to Anita Hill that could have been mistaken for sexual harassment.
Against hers.
He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals.
The same in West Palm Beach.
I was yelling, no, stop.
She suggested that she give me a ride, and I said, great.
2 cases that focus national attention on relationships between men and women, in the workplace and everywhere else. And we turn to Mona Charan, the syndicated columnist and panelist on CNN's Capital Gang. Mona, I'm wondering, is it sexist to see these 2 separate major stories in '91 as synonymous?
It's not sexist, Bernie, but the fact is, what did we learn from these two cases? What we learned is that American women are not sheep. The networks were trotting out all of these experts on sex harassment and then on rape, and like Catherine McKinnon, and offering them up to us as representatives of American women. Well, guess what the truth was? American women responded to these cases on the facts, just like American men. Nobody can speak for American women. We're too diverse. That was the lesson that came out of this year.
I agree with that, and I think women came out ahead on those two issues. I think there is a new sense that women have a value and a relationship to society and men that they didn't have before. No matter what happened to the justice in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and no matter what happened in the rape case with Willie Smith, I think women came out ahead.
You know,
the battle of the sexes is permanent.
Let me express an outrage over this, because it is one of the great outrages I've seen in my long time in Washington. And that was the performance of the Senate Judiciary Committee this year. I think it was the worst performance of the entire year of 1991.
Why?
Of putting that material before the public, unsubstantiated. There is no question. I don't know if Anita Hill was telling the truth or not, but there was no corroborating evidence of any time that she was telling the truth. And they should not have had open hearings on that, because it was devastating to Clarence Thomas. And I would tell you this: there is no nominee for any office that couldn't happen to. And any woman lying, telling falsehoods can come before any candidate. Now, they have set a precedent and say, I want to be heard with my accusations.
Now, wait a minute. Clarence Thomas, every Republican on that committee, conceded that if her story was true, it was relevant, it was important. In fact, ironically, in the course of denying that it was true, he set a rather high standard of sexual harassment, which I think they might not all have agreed to in the abstract. If it was true, what are you supposed to do about those charges? Ignore them?
That is not relevant.
What should have happened to those charges?
I'll tell you exactly what should happen. When the first evidence, or evidence, quote-unquote, came in, there should have been a closed-door session of the committee. They should have examined every shred of it and decided, do we go ahead or not? They never did that.
On behalf of the open hearings, though, it did give the American people an opportunity to decide for themselves on the performance of these vaunted members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it was a very eye-opening experience for the American people, and the conservatives came out ahead, incling Clarence Thomas.
Well, I really don't know how far.
I'm not going to sit here and have Strom Thurmond maligned. I mean, the reality is that we have established a direct correlation between the overuse of hair dye and loss of IQ in American males. We saw that in those hearings. I'm talking about Strom Thurmond. I'm talking about those hearings, which were a disaster. But the fact of the matter is, as far as who believes, I think it still remains with us, and it's an open question who believes. I happen to believe Anita Hill.
Can I say something?
Most American women believe Thomas.
But women aren't monolithic. You just told us that.
No, but it's an interesting statistic.
Let me see whether we can get a consensus here. Does everyone agree that Washington is still a sexist town?
Yes.
Yes.
More or less. I won't say completely sexist, but I say the imbalance. The imbalance is being corrected, but certainly women have a long way to go.
See what Mona Sweetheart.
I think especially on Capitol Hill.
Women have a long way to go. Capitol Hill particularly.
That's right.
I'm talking about official Washington.
I think it used to be a sexist town, but it isn't. But
I think it is.
I just want to make one point about these two issues. The William Kennedy Smith trial did not interest me at all as a news story. We didn't write a column about it. I don't think we ever would.
We learned a lot about sex, didn't we?
That's right. But the Clarence Thomas confirmation was very interesting. And what we have here, beyond Anita Hill, is we have such anguish over a Supreme Court nomination, because the Republicans have been making them. You have a Democratic Congress. I still believe that the Republic had it right when they did not have open hearings on Supreme Court nominees. They looked at the man's credentials. They said he qualifies or he doesn't qualify. And I think that's a better way of doing it.
If you're looking for an uplifting note, Bernie, how about this one? Not about sex, but about race. Everyone in the country took a side in this case, and everyone was siding for a black person. And I think there were a lot of people for whom that was a novel experience.
And
I think that was a good thing for race relations.
I agree with that. And not only that, they were, the black people who came forward
I want to hear
in
your
that
answer
hearing.
to Bernie's question.
Which question?
Is this a sexist town?
Well, I said yes, but I think it's improving. I would agree with Bob. But
it's not good enough or fast enough. This is 1991.
Well, let's go back though to the matter that Mike Kinsley raised, which is the terrific black people that America was introduced to at that hearing.
Not all of them were
most of them were. They were highly intelligent, articulate,
No, they were a
and not
slice of
only that,
Americana.
and they were diverse. They were diverse. You saw blacks who were conservative. You saw blacks who were conservatives as well as liberal. Oh, it's not all right.
Go ahead.
But they were blacks as well, conservative blacks as well as liberals, which is something that the American media doesn't portray often enough.
And something the black leadership hated.
Right.
Pardon me for just a second while I say we have to break. But coming next, the war in the Gulf. Saddam's out of Kuwait, but not out of power. Did the war end too soon?
The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
Desert Shield becomes a storm.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
For 40 days and nights, Iraq and occupied Kuwait come under the heaviest air bombardment since the Second World War. A high-tech war seen through the black and white eye of the world's most sophisticated weaponry. And then the final phase, the ground war.
This will not be another Vietnam.
It was not. 100 hours later, Iraq is broken. Kuwait, free again.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated.
In the desert, the commanders come to terms. But what of the aftermath? The Kurds and Saddam still in power, still dreaming his nuclear dreams. We go to Michael Kinsley, who co-hosts CNN's Crossfire each weeknight, syndicated columnist and senior editor of The New Republic. Mike, is it fair to accuse George Bush of having gotten cold feet, of botching the job, of not going through the gates of Baghdad and taking this man out?
Actually, here I am defending George Bush again. I think it is unfair, Bernie, and especially for those, including most of the people on this panel, I think, except for Mona, who opposed the war all along. George Bush gambled, he was ahead, and he walked away. At that point, there were very few American casualties. There had been lots of Iraqi casualties, which no one was paying any attention to. The great scandal of the war, in my view. All that might have changed in as little as a day or two. He'd achieved the UN objectives, his alliance was together, and he quit before more people died. I salute him for that.
There you go, the standard liberal view, which is you've always got to worry about those UN objectives. Obviously, what the president should have done is, in the last days of the war, he should have given an ultimatum to the Iraqis. He should have said, I want a change of government by tomorrow morning, or these tanks do roll all the way to Baghdad. He didn't do it. That much having been said, this war was George Bush's finest hour.
Let me,
Mark?
I think that the war has faded so quickly from our memory.
You can't remember what you think.
It was a riveting national experience less than a year ago. Jim Baker justified on the basis of jobs, jobs, jobs. Here we are with unemployment. You just don't want to remember that you were wrong.
No,
not wrong, my darling. I mean, I still defy you and all your conservative buddies to volunteer to serve. Any one of them. Any one of them.
Lots
and all
of conservatives volunteer to serve.
That's ridiculous. Untrue. That is absolutely untrue.
Argument.
You want to go right through? You want to go right through the same argument?
That's not the point.
It gave President Bush and his administration a chance to blame the recession on something that didn't cause it.
It blamed him on Saddam Hussein. It blamed him on Saddam Hussein. It had nothing to do with it.
Let me respond.
Let
me respond to Mike, because he mischaracterized me as being opposed to the war. Being opposed to the war has a certain characteristic to it. It means I was against the Vietnam War, all these loonies in the streets. I was never against the Gulf War. I was against getting into the Gulf War. And if you don't understand that distinction, send me a self-addressed stamp envelope, and I'll give you a longer thing. But I will agree with Mike that there is no way, under the premises that this war was fought as a coalition war, as a war in which we had allies and limited gain and limited objectives, there's no way that the president could properly have gone on to Baghdad.
I agree with him. That was the mandate. That was the mandate from the United Nations.
That's true.
And I hate to play the heavy, but we have reached the end of...
Oh, I just want to say one.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Rolly.
I think that Bush miscalculated. He could not have gone into Baghdad. He really thought he had won. He really thought Saddam Hussein had been virtually toppled. He thought the Kurdish problem was resolved. None of these things are true.
But again, the mandate, as Bob underscored, was not to go to the gates of Baghdad. No. That was not... Yeah, if George Bush had done that, he would have reneged on his promise to the Soviets. That's why the Congress, to the American people, to the world.
Bernie, in the setup...
He's done that before.
Kuwait is not free. I mean, we did not fight a war for democracy. We did not fight a war for self-determination. No. We did not fight a war for jobs. We fought a war over oil.
No,
it's as simple
as that. Let me just explain what the war was about.
That is true.
What the war was about was preventing Saddam Hussein from getting a nuclear weapon and from having control over 40% of the world's oil supply. If you don't think that that is a useful reason to fight a war, I'd be interested in hearing that. Do you not think that was a valuable reason to fight a war?
I don't think it was the reason.
Do we have a disagreement over whether or not this war was fought over oil?
Well, there's one point has been made.
Well, wait a minute. Do we have a disagreement?
In my opinion,
oil was one reason.
No.
If they manufactured kiwis in goddamn Kuwait, you think we would have been out of war?
Mark, let's clean up the language. Let's clean up the language. And let me say one word.
You just talked about Willie Smith.
Give George Bush huge credit for one thing, mobilizing, what was it, 500,000 troops, taking them almost 8,000 miles away, never been done in the history of the world. It was one of the great mobilizations that will ever be performed, and that is what he's going to be remembered for.
And I got a thrill. I got a thrill. I'm very critical of George Bush, but I got a great thrill when I looked on television and I see American tanks racing through the desert after all the agony of Vietnam and the agony I witnessed. This was something, you may not understand it, Mike, but this was something that ordinary Americans felt proud about, felt good about. I think it was something the country needed.
Well, one more point about oil. If you're not going to fight for oil when our economy depends upon it for its lifeblood, what are you going to fight about?
I'll tell you what we're going to fight for.
Why was it an oil war?
I'll tell you what we're going to fight for is when a president comes to the American people and said, this is what national leadership is about. This is what I'm asking you to do. All they asked us to do. George Bush didn't ask me to drive less. He didn't ask me to turn my thermostat down, to pay another nickel in taxes or anything of the sort. He asked me to watch CNN, and a lot of people did. But that was the war. It was a vision war. It was a visual war. It was a passive war. And let Novak cheer all he wants. Those 500,000 deserve our admiration and our respect.
You know why you didn't have to sacrifice?
Involvement.
You didn't have to sacrifice because our military did such a splendid job, and so you weren't called upon.
No, you talk about another oil. Are we still as vulnerable in oil? Are we still as vulnerable in oil today? We are more vulnerable.
Let me risk agreeing with Mona. Mark is right that in the end, the average American had to sacrifice not a thing for this war. But George Bush did take the risk that might have been different. There might have been huge American casualties. And people like me have been complaining that no American president ever says, don't ask what your country can do, whatever.
And another thing, Mark, just one point, Mark, you have been knocking the volunteer army ever since it was in creation. Just let me finish. This was a vindication of the volunteer army, and if you're honest, you'll admit that.
The volunteer army performed brilliantly.
All right,
Bob.
well, admit it then.
But let's say one thing. Let's say one thing. And Rollie Evans congratulated me on this point, stood up as a former Marine and saluted me for pointing out that there weren't sons of Bethesda, there weren't sons of McLean, there weren't sons of privilege in that war, and there was one son of a member of Congress who was facing down those kids. Right. That was quite unlike World War II, my darling, when senators and governors, sons and children and cabinet members.
Where we have to fight
I want to see when a country commits itself to war, I want the risk distributed evenly across society. I don't want
that's totalitarian.
That's communitarian, Bob. There's a big difference.
Do I need a fire extinguisher?
Everything.
Boy, they really get worked up, don't they? Up next, why the Arabs and Israelis are talking and why are the hostages finally free. Hostages in Lebanon freed one by one by one. A national nightmare ends when Peggy Say embraces her brother. The Bush administration embraces another post-war challenge. Secretary of State Baker succeeds in dragging the Arabs and Israelis to the peace table. But the euphoria of Madrid...
Don't wait for the other side to start. Each of you needs to get off the mark and get off of it quickly.
Runs up against a reality of mistrust in Washington.
They are raising talk busters, issues that they know will bust the talks.
that the continuation and escalation of settlement activity places the entire peace process in jeopardy.
Journalistically, Rolly Evans, you have labored over this part of the world. Your thoughts?
Everybody can give glory and hallelujahs to the last of the hostages coming out, but there's a paradox here. If the talks between Israel and the Palestinians, also Lebanon and Syria, do not go anywhere, and they're not going anywhere today, the paradox is, I predict there will be more terrorism in the Middle East, and there may be another round of hostages.
Bernie, Mona's going to say, I already know that the Gulf War changed the balance of power in the Middle East, and that's why the hostages got out, right?
Partly.
And I think that is partly true. However, one irony is that the hostage takers' main demand all along was the release of these terrorists held in Kuwait, and that was achieved not by George Bush, but ironically by Saddam Hussein.
Well, that's perfectly true. I think that a note should be said on behalf of these hostages. There were a lot of us who felt, look, these were people who were in a place where they didn't belong. They were told that they were in danger, and they went there anyway. And therefore, why should it be an objective of American policy to get them out? But when they did come out, they really demonstrated that they had been vastly improved as human beings in ways that maybe not all of us would under their terrible ordeal. So I think that a word of praise is due to Terry Anderson and Sutherland and the rest.
You're not suggesting it's a self-improvement experience?
No, I'm not.
Might be good for you. Might be good. Might be good. Might be good. I would say this, that Jim Baker, in my judgment, and I've been nothing but critical of him and his politics for a long time, deserves nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I will say this, that the decline of the Soviet Union is directly linked. The end of the Soviet Union, not the decline, is directly linked to the release of the hostages. Absolutely. It's directly linked to the more forthcoming attitude by Syria, and now the obstacle to some kind of agreement is the extremist, intransigent government in Israel.
Oh, Syria doesn't have an extremist, intransigent government?
Let me just say, let me agree, just for the first time, with my beloved partner. He is exactly right, and what Ashrawi just said, we heard it on the tube, is exactly right. They are going ahead with building new settlements, widening highways in the West Bank, creating problems on the ground, making it
you guys want to deal with those nice moderates in Syria
making
and
it
Damascus,
impossible
right?
for the Palestinian people to back their negotiators here.
You're not.
We have to end there. Next, our panelists on what they will remember most about 1991. A year from now, 5 years from now. All right, 1991. War and recession, the coup and communism fail. He said, she said, hostages finally free. Rolly Evans, the one special memory you'll remember from 1991, that year from now and 5 years from now.
Well, I may eat these words, Bernie, but it goes to the demise of the Soviet Union. Not just that that empire has gone, but that it has gone without a trace, not with a bang, but with a whimper. I never would have believed it possible. It is the one memory, if it continues to hold this way, that will stick with me more than any other of 1991.
Mike Kinsley.
Well, Rolly's right about what was most important, but my most vivid memory was to be in Saudi Arabia without CNN for the entire Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas episode, and come back and find that the whole country had gone through an incredibly intense experience that I had missed completely.
Mona Charen.
My most vivid memory is just like Rolly's, which is the throngs in the streets of the Soviet Union pulling down the statues of Lenin and Dzerzhinsky. It was a brilliant moment, a moment of bliss for conservatives that I know my friends Mark and Mike didn't share.
What are you talking about? Liberals were anti-communist long before conservatives. Please.
I frankly resent that moment. I'll be honest with you. I resent it. I mean, the fact that I wore my nation's uniform against communism, against that threat, and I frankly resent it, and I take personal umbrage at it. But I'll add this. I do think those were magic moments that were described. But I will say that the Cold War is over. Japan won it. And the reality of 1991 that is most terrifying to me is the loss of American optimism. That is the casualty right now. At a time when our values are triumphant in the world, American optimism is its lowest point in Rolly's lifetime.
I'm afraid that Mona has taken my memory, but I'm going to repeat it. It's so vivid, and that's Felix Dzerzhinsky's statue coming down in front of the KGB building, the man who presided over the most obscene, vile, dictatorship, inhuman operation in the history of mankind. I think he worse than Hitler, even as far as the dehumanizing of human beings. To see that statue coming down, I can't forget it.
Well, I can't forget being on the receiving end of United States military prowess and power when the Gulf War erupted with the bombing of Baghdad. It's the closest I've come to...
You were at Hotel El Rashid.
Al Rashid Hotel. It's the closest I've come to death and destruction. And it was an exciting moment. It was a dangerous moment. Unforgettable. Thank you all. That's Closing Arguments, the year in review. I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Happy holidays and a healthy new year.
Due to the situation which has evolved as a result of the formation of the Commonwealth of Independent States, I hereby discontinue my activities at the post of President of the USSR. I'm making this decision on considerations of principle. I firmly came out in favor of the independence of nations and sovereignty for the republics. At the same time, I support the preservation of the Union state and the integrity of this country. The developments took a different course. The policy prevailed of dismembering this country and disuniting the state, which is something I cannot subscribe to. After the Alma-Ata meeting and its decisions, my position did not change as far as this issue is concerned. Besides, it is my conviction that decisions of this caliber should have been made on the basis of popular will. However, I will do all I can to ensure that the agreements that were signed there lead towards real concord in society and facilitate the exit out of this crisis and the process of reform. This being my last opportunity to address you as President of the USSR, I find it necessary to inform you of what I think of the road that has been trodden by us since 1985. I find it important because there have been a lot of controversial, superficial, and unbiased judgments made on this score. Destiny so ruled that when I found myself at the helm of this state, it already was clear that something was wrong in this country. We had a lot of everything: land, oil and gas, other natural resources, and there was intellect and talent in abundance. However, we were living much worse than people in the industrialized countries were living, and we were increasingly lagging behind them. The reason was obvious even then. This country was suffocating in the shackles of the bureaucratic command system, doomed to cater to ideology and suffer and carry the onerous burden of the arms race. It found itself at the breaking point. All the half-hearted reforms, and there had been a lot of them, fell through one after another. This country was going nowhere, and we couldn't possibly live the way we did. We had to change everything radically. It is for this reason that I have never had any regrets, that I did not use the capacity of General Secretary just to reign in this country for several years. I would have considered it an irresponsible and immoral decision. I was also aware that to embark on reform of this caliber and in a society like ours was an extremely difficult and even risky undertaking. But even now, I'm convinced that the democratic reform that we launched in the spring of 1985 was historically correct. The process of renovating this country and bringing about drastic change in the international community has proven to be much more complicated than anyone could imagine. However, let us give its due to what has been done so far. This society has acquired freedom. It has been freed politically and spiritually, and this is the most important achievement that we have yet to fully come to grips with. And we haven't, because we haven't learned to use freedom yet. However, an effort of historical importance has been carried out. The totalitarian system has been eliminated, which prevented this country from becoming a prosperous and well-to-do country a long time ago. A breakthrough has been effected on the road of democratic change. Free elections have become a reality. Free press, freedom of worship, representative legislatures, and a multi-party system have all become reality. Human rights are being treated as the supreme principle and top priority. Movement has been started towards a multi-tier economy, and the equality of all forms of ownership is being established. Within the framework of the land reform, peasantry began to re-emerge as a class, and there arrived farmers, and millions of hectares of land are being given to urbanites and rural residents alike. The economic freedom of the producer has been made a law, and free enterprise, the emergence of joint stock companies, and privatization are gaining momentum. As the economy is being steered towards the market format, it is important to remember that the intention behind this reform is the well-being of man. And during this difficult period, everything should be done to provide for social security, which particularly concerns old people and children. We're now living in a new world. An end has been put to the Cold War and to the arms race, as well as to the mad militarization of the country, which has crippled our economy, public attitudes, and morals. The threat of nuclear war has been removed. Once again, I would like to stress that during this transitional period, I did everything that needed to be done to ensure that there was reliable control of nuclear weapons. We opened up ourselves to the rest of the world, abandoned the practices of interfering in others' internal affairs and using troops outside this country, and we were reciprocated with trust, solidarity, and respect. We have become one of the key strongholds in terms of restructuring modern civilization on a peaceful democratic basis. The nations and peoples of this country have acquired the right to freely choose their format for self-determination. The search for democratic reform of this multinational state had led us to the point where we were about to sign a new union treaty. All this change had taken a lot of strain and took place in the context of fierce struggle against the background of increasing resistance by the reactionary forces, both the party and state structures and the economic elite, as well as our habits, ideological bias, the sponging attitudes. The change ran up against our intolerance, a low level of political culture, and fear of change. That is why we have wasted so much time. The old system fell apart even before the new system began to work. Crisis of society as a result aggravated even further. I'm aware that there is popular resentment as a result of today's grave situation. I know that authority at all levels and myself are being subject to harsh criticisms. I would like to stress once again, though, that the cardinal change in so vast a country, given its heritage, could not have been carried out without difficulties, shock, and pain. The August coup brought the overall crisis to the limit. The most dangerous thing about this crisis is the collapse of statehood. I am concerned about the fact that the people in this country are ceasing to become citizens of a great power, and the consequences may be very difficult for all of us to deal with. I consider it vitally important to preserve the democratic achievements which have been attained in the past few years. We have paid with all our history and tragic experience for these democratic achievements, and they are not to be abandoned, whatever the circumstances and whatever the pretexts. Otherwise, all our hopes for the best will be buried. I am telling you all this honestly and straightforwardly, because this is my moral duty. I would like to express my gratitude to all people who have given their support to the policy of renovating this country and became involved in the democratic reform in this country. I am also thankful to the statesmen, politicians, and public figures, as well as millions of ordinary people abroad who understood our intentions, gave their support, and met us halfway. I thank them for their sincere cooperation with us. I am very much concerned as I am leaving this post. However, I also have feelings of hope and faith in you, your wisdom, and force of spirit. We are inheritants of a great civilization, and it now depends on all and everyone whether or not this civilization will make a comeback to a new and decent living today. I'd like, from the bottom of my heart, to thank everyone who has stood by me throughout these years, working for the righteous and good cause. Of course, there were mistakes made that could have been avoided, and many of the things that we did could have been done better, but I am positive that sooner or later, someday, our common efforts will bear fruit, and our nations will live in a prosperous democratic society. I wish everyone all the best.
And with that wish of all the best, it is presumed that some document will be signed, perhaps if not here, then someplace else. 4.5 pages, a document of resignation, as he had put it. Took him about 11, almost 12 minutes in which to read the 4.5 pages of Cyrillic script. And so it would seem that the former president of the Soviet Union now goes into what future one does not know. Ahead in this special report, CNN expects an exclusive interview with Mr. Gorbachev, by the way. We'll be telling you more about that. The resignation had been widely anticipated, but its consequences are a little bit harder to peg. To help us consider some of the possible fallout of today's events, joining us now here in Washington Live are some people with special knowledge of the people and the politics involved. Michael Beschloss is a diplomatic historian and author. And James Schlesinger, a former Secretary of Defense from 73 to 75, CIA Director in 1973. He's now with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gentlemen, was this a sort of a Washingtonian farewell, a little bit of a thank you and a warning, or how would you classify it? Michael?
It was restrained, Reed, but you know, Mikhail Gorbachev went out really with a bit of a bang, not a whimper. This was not merely a gracious statement calling on the people to support Boris Yeltsin. In fact, Boris Yeltsin did not figure prominently in this speech at all. It was a bit of a broadside. He said, I did not believe that the Soviet Union should have been dismembered, and if that was going to happen, it should have been done by popular will, which it was not. It almost suggests, Reed, that Mikhail Gorbachev wishes to continue functioning in that political system as someone who was in favor of the Union before and will push for as strong ties among the former Soviet republics as possible.
Dr. Schlesinger, in the speech, he makes prominent the onerous burden of the arms race. You helped him to bear some of that onerous burden that finally brought the system down, didn't you?
That's correct.
And how do you feel now that the Western world and its relentless adherence to its own beliefs has succeeded. What do you think is going to happen next?
I think that it is a dramatic victory for the West, and particularly a dramatic victory for the United States. There are those who have doubted that the United States could stay the course. We stood the course. We protected Western Europe for 45 years. To our surprise, the Soviet Union ultimately collapsed. Mr. Gorbachev deserves great credit for having recognized that his system was ideologically bankrupt, as he just revealed during his farewell address, which I thought was short and dramatic.
All right, and we're going to talk more with our guests in just a minute. We should tell you, though, President Bush is cutting short his Christmas at Camp David. He'll be coming back to Washington this evening for a White House address about these changes in the Soviet Union. CNN is planning live coverage of the speech starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's 0200 Greenwich Mean Time. The President and Mr. Gorbachev, by the way, just about 2.5 hours ago, had a conversation by telephone, and this was then followed with the announcement that Mr. Bush will have something to say on this earth-shaking movement tonight. And we'll continue in a moment.
A very difficult day. I would like to ask you first, sir, if you, looking back on your career as President and General Secretary, can think of a moment when you feel you might have done things differently and the outcome would have been that you did not resign tonight.
As for my overall choice, I wouldn't change anything in that this society was so overloaded with problems, and it was as a result of the implementation of a certain model. It was in a difficult situation. Perestroika and all that was associated with perestroika had been prepared by the entire preceding period. So far as strategy, nothing should have been done differently, and I'm convinced that that is so because I'm basing this on the arguments of all those 7 years. As for the tactical approaches to the various problems in the political and economic reform, in reforming our multi-ethnic state, also so far as the sequence of steps is concerned, and particularly as regards cooperation with democratic forces, and generally as regards the stimulation of the processes of democracy. Here I think we really had some very important breakthroughs and achievements and a great change in our society, but certain mistakes and blunders could have been avoided, and that would have made this process less painful. Although, let me repeat something I've said, in a society, in a country of 300 million people speaking 120 languages, a society that had evolved as a multi-ethnic society over centuries, turning that society toward civilization and universal values is difficult. We had no illusions about that, but I do think that certain tactical errors could have been avoided.
President Gorbachev, the time at Foros was very difficult for Raisa Maximovna and the rest of your family. I wonder if you could tell us how they're faring now, and what kind of emotions have they expressed to you as you've made this very difficult decision?
Well, I think that it's a mixed, very mixed feelings, very complicated feelings. Let's not oversimplify this situation. Things are happening to our country and to my family, and this has to affect my family, a family that is a very close-knit family, a family of like-minded people. So it's difficult, but on the other hand, there is an understanding that there are certain periods in any man's life and in politics. As I've just said to President Bush in my talk with him, I have no intention of hiding in the taiga, of hiding in the woods. I intend to continue to participate in a new role in my country's politics and in implementing the new thinking in world affairs. And my recent discussions with my partners and colleagues show that they want me to continue in this way. So my family, I would say, does not lose heart and is in courageous spirit and solidarity with me, so the family is all right. Quiet and stable.
I'd like to ask you...
And I'm very pleased, I'm very happy.
Excuse me. I'd like to ask you, sir, if you are feeling a grudge towards Boris Yeltsin for the way he pushed and finally brought the situation to tonight's events.
I think that would be a simplistic answer, that, they applied some pressure on Gorbachev once or twice. One person, Yeltsin, did it. Well, it's much more complex. This is a very complicated process, a big and important development. We had cooperation, we had confrontation too. Over the past months, there has been more cooperation. It is still there. I have just signed the decree about the discontinuation of my functions as Commander-in-Chief and the transfer of the control of nuclear weapons and the command and control of the use of nuclear weapons to the President of the Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin. This is the decree. We will be meeting shortly, and this act of the transfer of authority will take place. So we are cooperating, I think, in the interest of our states, in the interests of the Commonwealth, in the interests of the world. But I do not want to justify the way my colleagues are carrying out politics in certain episodes and in handling certain questions. I cannot share certain approaches that they adhere to. I have said that I disagree with that. I think that now we have to place above all else the fact that the country is awaiting very resolute, decisive steps in cooperation between all the republics in order to move out of the crisis. Today it is dangerous and it is impermissible for anyone to sow the seeds of confrontation in our society. And therefore, cooperation, the pooling of efforts, interaction within our society between the republics is necessary, and I call the attention of my colleagues to that, because otherwise it would be impossible to pass this critical stage. So I place this above all else, and I set aside all the rest, such as the political likes or dislikes. I think everyone is responsible for himself, not only politically, but also morally and ethically. I will never stoop so low as to intriguing or any kind of thing of that kind, a cheap thing, a vulgar thing of that kind. This is unacceptable to me for moral reasons.
President Gorbachev, you mentioned that you would like to remain involved in politics in some way. Do you have specific plans for the future that you could tell us about now? And also, how would you hope to be remembered by historians?
Well, the second question, let me answer that first. I would like to make sure that people give due recognition to what we've been doing over these years. I think they will do it one day. Currently, the hardships of life make it difficult for people to just sit down and think and talk about what happened and what is happening to us and the kind of people that we have become. We have become a different kind of people, a different kind of country, and therefore we can expect that there will be change and that we will become a democratic and prosperous country. We have the prerequisites for that. So one day people will rid themselves of the overloads of their everyday life, and they will recognize that, yes, it was difficult. We had to begin, however, and it is good that we began. We had begun many times, but then we stopped halfway. We now have to move forward, and I will help the Commonwealth and the leaders of all the states, particularly the Russian Federation, to move forward the reforms. That does not mean that I will always be in agreement with them, with what they do. If what they do helps to move forward democratic changes, if that helps to move our society in the direction of human needs, then I will be with them until the end. I have an interest, maybe more than any one of them, in their success. If they do otherwise, then if they do things differently, then I cannot pledge silence. I will speak out and I will give my assessment. I think that must be quite clear. What about the second question?
Do you have any specific plans right now for the future in terms of remaining involved in it?
Yes, well, I can answer this question a little later. I will have to recover a little bit, to relax, to take a rest. This is a resignation, and I have not taken a single vacation over the 7 years. You know, I think every year should be counted, every one of those 7 years should be counted as several years. But let me tell you that I have many proposals and offers, and my colleagues expect me to decide in what form I will be taking part in the political process in my country and in world affairs. So I have offers. I will not comment on them now.
A final question, and we thank you again for being with us. I'm wondering if leaving now, as you are, if you don't think that with the nation perhaps on the verge of disintegrating, that it is a very dangerous time for you to be leaving. You spoke in your address to the nation of your alarm at this moment. Do you feel it's more dangerous now than it would have been a year ago, perhaps, or a year in the future, your resignation?
Well, I think that, of course, currently the crisis, the problems are really very acute. The reforms are in a very acute stage, in a more acute stage in our multi-ethnic state than, let's say, a year ago. And therefore, cooperation and interaction are so important, and that's why I wanted so much a reform of a united state, so as to make sure that all republics closely cooperate in handling all those tasks. But I don't want to scare people. Some people are saying that I am scaring the nation. I am just warning against the dangers, against certain dangers. But now that the Commonwealth has been established, and now that it has begun to establish the mechanisms of cooperation between the republics in the Commonwealth, I think that all political forces should help the establishment of the Commonwealth in order to facilitate cooperation in handling all political, economic, social, and ethnic problems. So I would now set aside all political conflicts and battles, all the internecine battles, similar to the battles between old Russian fiefdoms. I think that we have one national task, and that is reform.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, thank you very much.
And that was an interview concluded just moments ago, and as the former president of the Soviet Union was speaking to Claire Shipman and Steve Hurst, there was a changing of the symbolism over the Krim, over the Kremlin, the old ancient fortress, where the flag of the USSR, the familiar hammer and sickle against its red background, was being taken down.